All right, everybody, welcome back to the Krueg Show as we get you ready for, of course, Super Bowl Sunday. And joining us is Anish Shroff from ESPN, who is also the voice of the Carolina Panthers and is going to stop by and tell us a little bit about what he thinks of Coach Wilks, the new defensive coordinator for your San Francisco 49ers. Anish, how are you today?
Yeah, it's actually Anish.
Oh, Anish, I'm sorry. How's things going? And, this is actually the second time we spoke because we spoke earlier this year. Forgive me, because we did a little Niners-Panthers preview when the Niners and Panthers hooked up. And this is obviously before the Christian McCaffrey trade. How did the rest of the season play out for the Panthers?
Well, it was an interesting season. That Niners game obviously was a big tipping point, a big pivot point in the season. Sea of Red showed up at Bank of America Stadium. The Niners pulled away in the second half, and we left leaving that game wondering about how the optics would impact the franchise going forward. And then a day later, Matt Rule was fired. Steve Wilks became the interim head coach. They go out to Los Angeles, looked a little lifeless. Robbie Anderson blows up on the sideline. He gets traded. Christian McCaffrey gets traded later following the week of the Rams game. And then for whatever reason, there was a little magic born with Steve Wilks, and they found a way to beat Tom Brady and the Bucs. Nobody saw that coming. They go 6-6 the rest of the way, 6-5 really the rest of the way, and somehow played meaningful games into January. They had a chance. They had an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter late in the season against Tampa Bay, Week 17. If they hang on to win, all they would have had to do was beat the Saints in Week 18, which they ended up doing, and they would have hosted a playoff game. So a wild season, my first season with the team, and everybody said you may not see another season like this as long as you're doing this, if you're doing it for a long time. So a lot of twists, a lot of turns, and so much of it started with that San Francisco game.
Yeah, and of course the McCaffrey trade turned the 49ers season around because his first game in a Niner uniform in Los Angeles, he almost single-handedly won the game for the 49ers. He was absolutely phenomenal. Were you, from watching from afar and the people there in Carolina, were you guys at all surprised by the impact that he had on the 49er offense?
No, he is a top 5 offensive player in the NFL when he's healthy, and he was healthy this year. The Panthers did a good job, and so did the 49ers in terms of load management throughout the week, making sure he's fresh on Sunday when it matters. He does it all. He can run. He can catch. As we saw in the first 49er game, he can throw as well, and he threw a touchdown. And I remember watching the playoff game, the last one that the 49ers were in the NFC Championship against Philly, and I'm thinking, at some point, the way the quarterback situation unfolded, maybe McCaffrey is your wildcat option. That might have been the way to go, but that's fait accompli now.
Yeah. What did you, first of all, the Matt Rule thing, when we had talked going into that 49er game, there were rumblings that Rule was on the hot seat, but it came, as you said, the very next day. Did you have any indications of that? And what was that transition like from Rule, who obviously meant well coming out of college? It didn't necessarily work out, to Steve Wilks, who has an NFL resume and had NFL experience. How did Steve make that transition taking over for Matt, and how did it affect the team overall?
Well, the thing you have to remember, Steve Wilks was a head coach before, had one season in Arizona, kind of got a raw deal where he had to play Josh Rosen at quarterback, and things didn't work out. He got let go after one season, but everybody sort of agreed it was a consensus that he had gotten a raw deal. He had a lot of currency built up with the Panthers and the fan base, which helped. He was the defensive coordinator on the 2015 team that went to the Super Bowl. He is a Charlotte native. He played his college ball not far from Charlotte, just a couple hours away at App State, played arena football in Charlotte, and again, was a coach here when things were good. So there was a lot of currency built up, not just in the locker room, but in the community. And I thought the biggest difference was just his messaging. It was direct. It was straightforward. Sometimes this is an issue about fit. And for whatever reason, Matt Rule, it just didn't work. It just wasn't the right fit. I will say this about Matt Rule. I don't think he ever lost the locker room. You didn't really see that. And so when Steve Wilks took over, I think the locker room got closer and it was galvanized, and a lot of that credit goes to Wilks. But I wouldn't say Matt Rule ever lost the locker room. That was still intact even when he was let go. It was a close-knit team. Guys got along. Guys genuinely liked each other. But they just simplified a few things offensively. And I think the biggest difference was you started to see some of the younger players get unlocked. Terrace Marshall, for example, a wide receiver who sort of had been underwhelming in the first year and a half of his career, started to take some big steps. The offensive line really started to come together. And I know Wilks is a defensive coach. And then even on the defensive side, you saw the maturation of some players. So you started to see the growth potential from young guys, which is what you want when you're in a position that the Panthers are in.
What do you think of Wilks' scheme? It's a 4-3 front. I think one of the things that made him, a good fit here in San Francisco is just that I think the Niners, they really like Chris Kosaric and they like their wide 9 defensive front. And they, Vic Fangio rumors had a lot of, we're given a lot of credence here, but I think Vic is kind of historically a 3-4. He prefers that 34 front. What did you think of Steve's defense throughout the year?
Well, you got to remember, one, it was a very young defense, and you saw Brian Burns really develop from a pass rusher who we knew had a great first step and could get the quarterback to somebody who could really stand up against the run. I thought he played real well against the run. Derek Brown was the breakout star defensively this year on the interior of the D-line. Frankie Louvu had one of the best seasons for a linebacker in the NFL this season. It flew under the radar. Shaq Thompson, solid. And then on the back end, you saw what J.C. Horn could do before he got hurt. They had some injuries. You lost your top 2 corners by season's end. You had some injuries up front. You had some injuries on the back end. But I thought defensively, they just had an identity under Steve Wilks. It was a physical, tough brand of football. And again, part of that is complementary football too, where, as good as the Panthers might have been in their top 11 on defense, they're not as deep as, say, the 49ers are, where you can be down a couple of guys and the next man up, there's not much of a drop-off. That wasn't the case in Carolina. And so you found a way to play complementary football. You run the ball, you pound it, you play behind your big offensive line, you take as much of the clock up as you can, and you let that defense be fresh. And when they were able to implement that game plan, generally the outcome was pretty good.
The traits, I'm just looking at some of the numbers, comparing him to D'Amico Ryans. It looks like Wilks' defenses tend to blitz a little bit more, at least than D'Amico had here in San Francisco. Of course, D'Amico has Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead, so maybe he's trying to get it done with his front 4 and drop 7. But it's also kind of thought that, the Niners have historically played a lot of zone here, and that Wilks does like to play a little zone defense or a lot of zone defense, and may even prefer that single high look, the cover 3, which would put Talanoa Hufanga, right there in that position up on the line of scrimmage, kind of a lurker against the run, where he is so strong. What are the traits that you've noticed of a Steve Wilks defense?
Yeah, again, I think if the Panthers had a Hufanga, you probably would have seen more of that. They just didn't have that ball hawking safety that you want. That is on the shopping list for the offseason. What you'll see from a Steve Wilks defense, they're generally disciplined. They don't commit a lot of penalties. And where you'll see the young players, I think you'll see growth and you'll see development from them. Scheme-wise, they played a lot of nickel. They were in a lot of base 4-3 as well. From the blitzing standpoint, part of the reason you had to blitz more is there was so much attention on Brian Burns, and you lost to Hassan Reddick in the offseason. We're all seeing what he's doing now with Philadelphia, so you got to get that pressure somewhere. It was easier to do that last year when you had Reddick and Burns. This year you got a little bit more from the middle from Derek Brown, but the other edge, they didn't get a ton of pressure unless it was bringing Frankie Louvu, a linebacker. So a lot of that was personnel-based. And to me, that was Steve Wilks' strength. Now, after the first game, they assessed, this is what we have. We're not going to try to say this is what we do if the pieces don't fit. We're going to build the puzzle according to the pieces that we have. And that's coaching. Some coaches come in, this is what I run. You see it in college. We're going to do this no matter what. Well, the guys that you inherit are a bunch of option guys. You can't go spread and play air raid, right?
Right.
Steve Wilks basically said, what's our strength? How can we win? And again, it was complementary football. A lot of it goes back to the offensive side where they said, we've got to run the ball. We've got a big, heavy hammer in Deontay Foreman. We've got a big O-line. That can take some pressure off the defense, keep the D fresh. Now, part of the struggles early on in the first 4 or 5 games, the defense would get worn down in the fourth quarter. So the Panthers would be in all these games. The defense then just played too many snaps, and part of the reason was the offense couldn't stay out on the field long enough to give the defense a breather. So they sort of figured out that formula. I thought that was his biggest strength, really assessing, hey, this is where we're good, and now let's build a scheme around that instead of doing it the other way around.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I saw an interview with Brian Burns done in Vegas at the site of the Pro Bowl festivities, if you will, and he was asked about Steve Wilks by a Bay Area media person, and his comment was really interesting to me because he said, Steve is a guy who cares as much about his players as people as he does about his players as football players or key cogs in his defense. And, that really kind of hit home. I don't know how much, time you had around Coach Wilks, but did you get a feel for his personality and how he interacts with his players? I did see an end of the year video. I guess it was after the last game where he gave the kicker the game ball. And you can kind of see that, losing teams sometimes fracture, that. I mean, regardless of sport. And it just seemed like a very united room at the end of the year, despite the fact there were some struggles.
This was a team that was 1-4 when Matt Rule was fired. They lose the next game, 1-5. Interim head coach, that can easily spiral into a 4-3 win season. We've seen that plenty of times in the NFL. Yet this team was able to stay the course and, again, almost made the playoffs. One of the things I got from the players in the locker room where they really respected Steve, they said, he's not going to try to be your buddy or your pal and tell you what you want to hear. He will tell you the truth. He'll be your friend, but your friend tells you the truth. And that was the message in the locker room when Steve Wilks took over. If you're not doing something, I'm going to tell you. There was an accountability, and not saying that wasn't there under Matt Rule. It just seemed more streamlined. It just seemed more direct. The communication seemed more effective, and the players were galvanized by him. And you brought up the kicker getting the game ball. The backstory to that is Steve Wilks' third game as head coach. The Panthers are in Atlanta. They hit a 62-yard touchdown in the final seconds of regulation. DJ Moore removes his helmet, so there's a penalty on the ensuing point after. Eddie Pinheiro, the kicker, still kicking indoors, but now from 48 instead of 35 or whatever it was, he misses the kick. The game goes into overtime. In overtime, the Panthers get an interception. They return it down inside the 20 of Atlanta. Pinheiro has another chance to win the game, and he misses a field goal that was shorter than an extra point. And there were all these calls to cut Eddie Pinheiro. Let him go. He was a replacement kicker to begin with. The only reason he made the team was because Zane Gonzalez got hurt in the final preseason game. Cut Eddie, cut Eddie, cut Eddie. And Steve Wilks very emphatically said right after the game, Eddie's our kicker. They did not bring in another kicker to come and even compete and try out. Next game, they lose to Cincinnati. But after that fiasco in Atlanta, Eddie Pinheiro did not miss another kick the rest of the season. And in the final game of the season, he hits the game winner against New Orleans. And at the time, it felt like that was a kick that could potentially have delivered Steve Wilks the head coaching job. And it meant so much to Wilks. It meant so much to Eddie Pinheiro and so much to everybody in the locker room. But again, that's the belief in the player. Hey, he's our guy. We're not going to wait 2 days. We're going to say it right after the game. And that conviction from Steve Wilks, that's the messaging I'm talking about. That resonated throughout the locker room. And this was a different team over the last 12 games than it was in the first 5 games.
That is an interesting anecdote for sure. You mentioned before that Wilks played collegiately at App State as a defensive back. I'm just kind of wondering, personnel wise, is there any, some guys, some coaches, whether they're offensive coaches or defensive coaches, are associated with a particular position group. Like, hey, this coach really prefers big receivers or big corners or, first round corners or huge bodies, up front at defensive tackle, or incredible edge speed, or whatever traits that defensive coordinator sometimes likes. You might see a common denominators in their defenses over the years. Are there personnel tendencies that Coach Wilks has that you've noticed?
It's hard to say because he inherited a roster that wasn't his. He was working with what was there. And when he took over, Jeremy Chin, the star safety, is out 6 weeks with a hamstring injury. Then you lose Dante Jackson, your number 2 corner, to an Achilles. J.C. Horn was banged up most of the season. So, again, it wasn't like he could go out shopping and get his guys. He'll have more control, I think, over personnel on the defensive side with an entire offseason in San Francisco. You come in midseason. Remember, it wasn't like he had been with the team for the past few years. He was hired in the offseason to coach the defensive backs. So he hadn't been there long enough. And it's, hey, this is what you have. These are the cards that you're dealt with. And let's see how far you can get. And I made the analogy on the air a bunch. If you're a poker player, this was somebody who was basically dealt, 6-7 hands in a row of 2-7 offsuit and ended up bluffing his way to the final table and got heads up against the big stack and almost had the big stack blinking. That's what Steve Wilks did. So when we talk about personnel, what he could do in San Francisco may be vastly different or significantly different than what he did in Carolina, where he'll probably have, again, an offseason to evaluate. These are the pieces that we have. How do we want to deploy them versus, okay, we're in the middle of a season. You got to figure out how to make this into chicken salad.
So Frank Reich takes over. They now have a new defensive coordinator, kind of some changes. Are they making any changes to their defense going forward? I ask because I'm just looking at the Panthers free agents, and a couple guys really do fit a couple of the needs the 49ers potentially could have. Matt Ioannidis, who played collegiately at Temple and played with the Commanders, is that kind of anchoring run stuffer that the 49ers could use at defensive tackle opposite Eric Armstead. And if Azeez Al-Shaair walks away in free agency, Corey Littleton would be probably a very cost-effective veteran replacement. What did you think of watching those two defenders this year, and do you think that Wilks might bring them to San Francisco? I know it's hard to speculate on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Corey Littleton was a rotational piece for most of the season. He did see more snaps toward the end of the year when it seemed that Damian Wilson had fallen out of favor a little bit. One other thing you need to remember is when Wilks took over, one of the first moves he made was he let go of a few defensive coaches. The defensive coordinator was let go. The D-line coach was let go. Another coach ended up leaving to join Matt Rule at Nebraska. So there were some changes on the defensive side. They had a shortened roster of defensive coaches that you're dealing with as well. But Ioannidis, I think that's a toss-up. He was solid. It wouldn't surprise me if he came back. It wouldn't surprise me if he was let go. I would be surprised if Corey Littleton came back, but again, you never know. The one that we're watching is Shaq Thompson, who had 130 plus tackles. He was on that 2015 team as a rookie playing with Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis. He's got a big cap number, and there's a lot of chatter about the cap savings that would come if you cut Shaq Thompson. He means a lot to that locker room. He's the leader on that team. So I don't know if they'll restructure, but that's going to be the big decision defensively. Other than that, the key pieces, for the most part, come back. C.J. Henderson might be one to watch. He oozes potential. We just haven't seen it yet. Former first-round pick out of Florida, acquired last year by the Panthers in a trade with Jacksonville. He was very inconsistent this year, but he has the talent. All the other DBs tell me he's got more talent than any other defensive back on the roster. We just have not seen it on game day. There's been some inconsistency. So again, he's one to watch.
One of my favorite corners in the league is J.C. Horn. How did Horn respond to Wilks' coaching? I mean, Horn is a major talent, and I think he's probably going to be good with almost any coach. But I thought it was interesting that Steve had a chance to coach JC as a young, improving, let's say, ascending football player.
Yeah, he's a star. He's a star. And had the team been better, he would have gotten more national recognition. He's a lockdown corner. He's physical. He's fast. He's got size. He has ball skills. He has everything you want in that island corner. To me, he is a foundational piece on this defense. he had been building toward that last year as a rookie, then got hurt and missed most of the season with a broken foot, was banged up most of this year, had a wrist injury, which cost him the last game. But J.C. Horn is a guy they will build around defensively. Those guys don't grow on trees. I would imagine Wilks' tutelage helped him quite a bit. But J.C. is a bona fide star in this league.
Couple last ones before we let you go. Did you personally, as the announcer for the team, get any one-on-one dialogue with Wilks throughout the year? And how would you describe his personality? We know he's a family guy. We also know that he's, either by choice or not, he has moved an awful lot. I mean, 6 different jobs in 6 different years in the NFL. I think 7 different stops in college prior to that. Sometimes that's by choice, but sometimes that isn't.
Yeah, I would talk with Steve Wilks one-on-one twice a week. He would come on our Monday radio show. We would do a Wednesday interview for our pregame show every week. So we had a good amount of time to spend together this season, just talking with the microphone in front of his face, but also without the microphone. I really enjoyed Steve Wilks. I think the Panthers made a great hire in Frank Reich, but when you're in the building and you're there a lot, I think it's easy to say, yeah, a lot of us were rooting for Steve Wilks. We understand, it's a business, and Frank Reich has been great, and he's been great to talk to, and I'm sure he'll do a great job. But I think we were all rooting for Steve Wilks to get a great opportunity when we found out he was not going to be the guy. People genuinely liked him. He had a clear message. He had a clear vision. And there was something just real and authentic about him when you spoke to him. So I really enjoyed, my time with Steve Wilks. I'm rooting for him in San Francisco. And honestly, I'm rooting for him to get another head coaching job because I do think he can be a heck of a head coach in the NFL.
2 last questions for you. Sam Darnold, is he coming back? I know PJ Walker at times played well. They drafted Matt Corral in the 3rd round, and obviously they have got some hopes for him. How do you see the quarterback room, and do you see Jimmy Garoppolo potentially in this mix at quarterback for Carolina?
That is the $64,000 question in the Carolinas. What happens at quarterback? Sam Darnold could be an option. I would not rule him out entirely just because he played some of the best ball of his career after Steve Wilks took over. Didn't play that well the last 2 games, but he had been pretty solid. And if you're looking for a bridge option, should you draft a young quarterback, you could do a lot worse than Sam Darnold. I think a lot of Panther fans who were ready to write Sam Darnold off for good before last season would welcome him back as a bridge guy if you had drafted a quarterback in the 1st round. They are going to explore any and all options to solve that position because the reality is in the NFC South right now, Tom Brady just retired. Saints have a question at quarterback. Is Desmond Ridder the guy for the Falcons, or do they draft someone or try to trade up? Everybody's got an issue at quarterback. The team that solves it is going to be the team in that division. I wish I know or I knew. It could be Jimmy Garoppolo. It could be David Carr. Who knows if they can kick the tires on Aaron Rodgers. I would imagine every option is on the table, but that is the priority position. They feel they're a quarterback and a head coach away. They got their head coach. Now they need to get their quarterback, and whether that's through the draft, free agency, or trade, that remains to be seen. But that's the $1 million question. But to your point, I don't think they're writing off Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is very much an option.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really like the Reich hire. I mean, I was shocked that Reich and Chris Ballard did not win a Super Bowl or get closer to a Super Bowl in Indy, but they couldn't solve their quarterback situation. But I just think that Frank Reich is a really good coach who's going to kind of show that in Carolina. And I think that was a terrific hire. Last one, you mentioned Hassan Reddick, and we saw Reddick emerge this year as just this force. And unfortunately here in San Francisco, as you're well aware, the season ended largely because of a Hassan Reddick play against Brock Purdy. But what was the talk this year as Reddick was ascending to these crazy heights in Philadelphia? Did they utilize him differently? And since we have you here, who's your pick for the Super Bowl? I'm leaning with the Chiefs, but I'm not sure. I can't tell if that's me looking at it through 49er glasses, wanting to see the Eagles get their comeuppance, or the fact that Kansas City hung 40 on the Niners at Levi's earlier this year and was impressive doing so. Give me your thoughts on Reddick and the game.
Yeah, first Reddick. So he was a double-digit sack guy last year for Carolina on a one-year prove-it contract. Played real well, and they made a business decision. Where do we want to allocate that money? They had a second-round pick in Yetur Gross-Matos, who, again, did not have the season they thought he would, only 2.5 sacks. They spent that money in signing Dante Jackson to an extension, and they made the decision to let Reddick walk, and he puts together a monster season with Philadelphia. So I think for a lot of Panther fans, you sort of look at it and say, is that one that got away? But as you're building a roster, you also have Brian Burns on the other end. Would it have been nice to have Reddick back? I'm sure it would have. Hindsight is always 20/20. But we saw this last year. We saw what kind of player that he could be, and now he's on a stacked defense where you've got to account for other players. He's allowed to make plays. So what Haason Reddick did this year, did it surprise me? No, not a whole lot. I mean, what do you have, 17 plus sacks, 17 and a half sacks? That number was impressive. But we saw in Carolina last year that he was a really good player. And then Super Bowl, my heart keeps saying Mahomes because you want to go with the best quarterback. And Patrick Mahomes, to me, is a unicorn. But when I look at the totality of both teams, I mean, where's the weakness with Philadelphia?
Maybe the run D, maybe,
but Kansas City is not a great running team. Throwing the football, you've got Kelsey, but the wide receivers are not what they used to be in the past with injuries, and some older guys. Defensively on the back end, they did make some crucial plays late in the game against Cincinnati, but that has been an area of inconsistency where with Philly, they can run the ball, they can throw the ball. Jalen Hurts has played MVP caliber football this season. I really want to go with Kansas City just because I grew up in New Jersey and I don't like to see Philadelphia have anything nice. But I got to be honest with you. I'm just not sure there's a weakness. And I'm not short selling Jalen Hurts either in this game against Patrick Mahomes. Jalen Hurts has balled out this season. When he's been healthy, he has been tremendous. They have done just an incredible job building that roster. Credit to Howie Roseman in that front office. If I had to pick, honestly, I'd probably say Philadelphia, 30-23, 30-24, somewhere in that vein.
Hey, thank you very much for your time. And man, you're a man of all seasons. You do college football, college basketball, college sports of all kind, NFL football. If a young aspiring play-by-play guy's watching this, is it more challenging for you to do to have new anecdotes and new things to say about a team that you cover from training camp through the season, or more difficult to do some of the ESPN work where you're popping in and you're doing a college basketball matchup and man, I guess you got to do a crash course in the two teams on a morning before the game. I mean, as a play-by-play guy who's done it for years now, what would you advise to the, young aspiring play-by-play kids who want to do what you do?
Well, I'll tell you, don't do it the morning before the game. I always say if you do the preparation, the calling of the game, the broadcast becomes the easiest 2 to 3 hours of your week if you do the preparation. So preparation is everything. Curiosity is everything. Chase rabbit holes. If you see something that intrigues you, follow it. Sometimes it leads to nothing. Sometimes it leads to discovery and a story and a unique angle and a unique twist on something that you've seen a million times over and over. I would say read, cultural literacy, vocabulary, finding new ways to say things, finding different ways to say the same things, using nouns as verbs and verbs as nouns, having creativity and imaginative freedom with your language. That's a huge part of it. But at the end of the day, is it harder to do one team? No, it's easier, I think, to do one team just because you're entrenched in the day-to-day and you know what's going on and you're in the locker room and you're with the coaches and you're getting different anecdotes on a weekly basis. When you're driving by and stopping in for a game we had Syracuse and Florida State the other night, it takes a little bit more work, especially college basketball mid-season. You're in the dregs of February. How do I put some lipstick on this thing? How can I find creative ways? So you're always trying to find something that hasn't been done, some different spin on it. That's part of the challenge. That's the fun part for me. If you don't like that part, then this is probably not for you. If it's, hey, I just want to show up and tell you who scored and what the score is and how much time is left. If you can't add context to what you're watching, you're not doing it right. So you got to enjoy it. You got to live it. You got to watch the games. I can't tell you, how much television I watch, and it's just games. And even if I'm not watching it live, I'm watching it the next morning. So my advice to anybody coming up is, live it, breathe it, and work at the craft.
Yeah. Listen to this man, young broadcasters. He went to Syracuse. He knows his game. By the way, I saw it from your Syracuse Orangeman, Mikel Jones, I think the linebacker in the All-Star game. My goodness. He looks good. I mean, I know he's small, but that's kind of the trend in the NFL. But Jones, he's probably going to be a day 3 pick in the draft, but he looked really good. He
is, they've had some pretty good linebackers come out of there the last few years, and some pretty good defensive backs as well. Jones is a guy that I'm watching for. The program has been a little up and down. They did go to a bowl game this year, but the draft is always interesting. And that's part of the fun part of the job now for me, is covering college and the NFL. You get to see so many of these guys that you covered in college,
right,
playing on Sundays. And, with some of them, Josh Allen's a great example. I did one of his games in college when Wyoming played at Nebraska, and he threw 5 interceptions, and I walked away going, this is somebody who's going to get a GM and a head coach fired if they draft him in the first round. And, here we are. So sometimes sometimes you don't know.
No, that is so true. I think I saw many of those games. Hey, Anish, a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for making the time, and good luck to you on your travels, and thanks for giving us a little thumbnail sketch on Steve Wilks. We really did appreciate it.
All right, you got it. Take care.
Thank you. Anish Shroff really does a nice job for ESPN. All right, we are brought to you, of course, by Pig in a Pickle. The Krueg Show brought to you by Pig in a Pickle. 2 locations. They're at 341 Corte Madera Town Center in Marin County, right there in central Marin and Corte Madera. And they're open 7 days a week in Corte Madera. And then they're open Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. They got a really cool location in the public marketplace there in Emeryville. So check out Pig in a Pickle. If you love barbecue, you are going to love Damon and Mary's restaurant, Pig in a Pickle. And, whether it's the pulled pork, the baby back ribs, the chicken, the house-made hot links, all of it's great. I love the brisket. The brisket, they cook it for like 14 to 16 hours, and it just drinks in all that flavor. It's amazing. My kids love going with me because they love the sides. I go potato salad, but they'll go ranch style beans. The white cheddar mac and cheese is a favorite with my kids. You got to get the beef brisket chili. Got to try it. Get at least a cup. And you got to try the kettle tallow potato chips, which they bag up in Marin County once a day. They cook them in beef tallow, and they're absolutely incredible. And they season them with the same seasoning and rub that they put on their barbecue chicken. So you got to have the potato chips, the kettle tallow chips from Pig in a Pickle. They do catering. They've got craft beers. They've got a kids menu. They've got a family meals. They've got salads. Mix in a salad every now and then. And you can get brisket on your salad. You can get pulled pork, pulled chicken on your salad. But they have incredible food at Pig in a Pickle. Open in Marin County, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. And you can do takeout. Lots of people do. They stop by on the way home after work. So go to Pig in a Pickle and tell them that Krueg sent you. Go say hi to Damon. Go say hi to Mary. Get some brisket. Get that brisket chili. And enjoy the greatness of Pig in a Pickle. Say hi to Damon. Say hi to Mary. And when you get in there, say, hey, the Krueg Show sent us. We're big fans of the Krueg Show. Let them know. And check out Pig in a Pickle. As I said, open 7 days a week in Corte Madera, 5 days a week in Emeryville. And thanks to all the good people at Pig in a Pickle for being proud sponsors of the Krueg Show. And now a thought from our sponsor, Telmetrics.
And thanks to Tony Cassera and the good people at Cassera's Italian Menswear. They are housing the Krueg Show t-shirts, and they're a proud sponsor of the show as well. The Krueg Show t-shirt, the Krueg Show podcast t-shirt is available there at their store in Dublin. Their address is 7372 San Ramon Road in Dublin, California. And go see Tony Cassera and get yourself a Krueg Show t-shirt and support the show. And special thanks to our sponsor, New York Style Italian Sausage. That's right, NewYorkStyleSausage.com is their website. Phenomenal product, whether it's the breakfast sausage, the Italian mild, the Italian spicy, the chorizo. You cannot go wrong with New York Style Italian Sausage. Once again, NewYorkStyleSausage.com. Often imitated, never equaled.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. You know, how can you go to church if you don't believe in God? You know, and along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. You know, it wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, you know, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, you know, that...
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, you know, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never gonna deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it, guaranteed.
Hey Pasquale, Dan Cochimilio here for the Krueg Show. Just picked up for the very first time some of your New York style Italian sausage here at Sam's Club in Arizona. My wife just cooked it and I'm about to take a bite. Man, this is good. Pasquale, when you winked and said you guaranteed we love it, you're right. This stuff is absolutely amazing. Best sausage I've ever tasted. Thank you, Pasquale.
All right, welcome back to the Krueg Show. Hope you guys enjoyed our conversation with Anish Shroff, the voice of the Carolina Panthers. SG Sports Talk channel has become a YouTube member of the Krueg Show. There you go. Thank you, Chardal, for being a member of the Krueg Show. One of the things I wanted to throw out, we could get into right now in the chat, and we haven't really touched on it that much this week. I asked Anish about it. Who wins the Super Bowl on Sunday and why? Give me a reason, not just who's going to win, but who's going to win, and tell me exactly why they're going to win. I've got some thoughts on that, but before we hit that, let's hit the chat. Jim Molay says, happy Friday or Friday cheers all. That's right. It's Friday, getting ready for the weekend. Hope everybody's getting, tomorrow. It always amazes me how many people have become into the Super Bowl. I mean, the Niners aren't in it, and there's no local Bay Area connection to the Super Bowl, but it's become just this incredible thing. If you go to the grocery store in the suburbs, let's say I'm out here in Walnut Creek, either today, tomorrow, or God forbid you wait till Sunday morning. I mean, it's like the last bag of chips has to be taken off the shelves. Like, I mean, it's like the end of the world is coming and people need to stock up. I mean, the amount of food that will be digested across America as we watch the Super Bowl is just monster. And I'm always amazed. Now, if the 49ers are in it, I get it. Then you've got the local connection and, you got people that aren't into football locally who are like, hey, the Niners are in it. I got to watch it. And then it's like, oh, we're going to have a party, run to the store, get this, get that. Let's make this, let's make that. What are you making for your Super Bowl Sunday party? Who do you like to win the game and why? So now what I've done in the past, I'll go like, maybe a big thing of buffalo wings. Go to Lenardi's, get the drumettes, right? Either grill them or bake them, and then put the Frank's Red hot sauce on them, and then put out a little whatever it is, ranch or blue cheese on the table, and let people go to town on that. And then I'll do some, I've done sliders where I just do a bunch of mini burgers on the grill. That always works well. I know people that go game day chili every year for the Super Bowl. So what is going to be the food du jour at your place on Super Bowl Sunday? A couple chats we want to read here. Keena Turner and Hooch says fewer penalties would be good for the 49ers this year. We've got this one from Dusty Gold. He says, I like the hire of Steve Wilks. Jimmy Mole says, yeah, we're familiar with Hassan Reddick. Yeah, there's no question about that. Moon Man says, yo, Krug, what's happening, man? What do y'all think about Cliff Kingsbury interviewing for the Texans OC job and then drafting CJ Stroud? Well, I think that's interesting. I mean, you got to remember this. Cliff Kingsbury played at Texas Tech. He's probably a more popular guy in the state of Texas than he is elsewhere. But didn't he say he was headed to Thailand and he didn't want to think about ever working in the NFL again? And I guess so much for that, huh? Maybe a couple weeks in Thailand made Cliff change his mind. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. Some guys, I mean, I think we all know this. Some coaches top out at the coordinator level. And they're great coordinators, but they aren't great head coaches. I mean, there are people that think that Kyle Shanahan fits that mold, but there's been many, many others. Ray Rhodes was a tremendous defensive backfield coach. He was a tremendous defensive coordinator. Didn't have a lot of success as an NFL head coach. If you want to go way, way back to, the old Washington Redskin days where they had Richie Pettibone, phenomenal coach. Phenomenal coordinator, couldn't get it done as a head coach. Bill Arnsparger, I believe, struggled when he was a head coach. I mean, it's just there. It's not all. George Seifert was a phenomenal defensive backfield coach, an incredible defensive coordinator. Obviously, had a lot of success with Walsh's team, but when he went to Carolina and had to coach his own team, Seifert was suddenly 1-15. When I think of great coaches who struggled as NFL head coaches, I'll tell you another one is Joe Bugle. Joe Bugle was I think one of the great offensive line coaches in the NFL. And then the Raiders made him their head coach. He really struggled in that role and he couldn't get any momentum going. So maybe Cliff Kingsbury is just in that mold. CW says, love the Wilks hire. Interested to see how much two linebacker sets he uses. Yeah, I mean, the Niners, are they going to go to, it sounds, they go with the 4-3 traditionally, but Do they send 5 rushers and have 2 stacked backers like they've done many times? I could see that. I could see that being a staple of what the 49ers do going forward. They want to get pressure up front. They have tremendous talent and speed at linebacker. And, I just think Wilks is a perfect hire for a lot of reasons. You wanted to keep your staff. He enables you to keep largely a bunch of your own staff. You wanted to keep Kosaric. Sounds like Kosaric's going to stick around. You really need to improve and develop your young defensive backs. I mean, if there's one thing that the 49ers on defense need, Jimmy Ward's a free agent. Tayshaun Gibson's a free agent. Emmanuel Mosley's a free agent, not to mention guys like Jason Verrett, Tarvarius Moore. So there's going to be a lot of turnover on the back end of this defense. Who's your nickel? Who's your starting free safety? Who's your starting corner opposite Charvarius Ward? Today, we don't know the answer to those questions. So, I think that's interesting that, Wilks still goes with the 4-3 defense. That fits what the Niners do. Isn't going to coach the D-line. His emphasis is on the back end. The Niners back end needs some improvement. They definitely need somebody who's got a good eye for defensive backfield talent, and maybe Wilks can fit that description as well. It sounds like he blitzes a little bit more, or did in Carolina than D'Amico did in San Francisco, but that could be simply a product of, they needed to in Carolina because they weren't getting a lot of pass rush. But I'm really eager to see, does Ioannidis come over? I could see Ioannidis being a good fit on the 49ers defensive line. Does Corey Littleton come over? I don't think it's going to cost a lot, but I think he would fit their defense. So Paul Pearman says, drives me crazy how teams can let go of interim head coaches that start to turn things around, especially if they are minority potential hires. Glad to see the 49ers pick him up so he'll get another shot. It does seem like, if you're the interim coach, that no matter how you do, it's like, hey, you're in a different category in their mind. Like, hey, you're not even a head coaching, full-time head coach option. We're thinking of other guys. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that the team didn't go south, that they played some pretty good football, that they stayed together, that they won more than they lost. And as Anish kind of pointed out, things can kind of tumble out of control. So, that's a really tough job to walk into a losing season. It's easy to keep the players' attention when you're winning games and the playoffs are there at the end of the year. But man, when the playoffs aren't there and guys are, have their own agenda, and you've got a number of guys who are walking away at the end of the year, and it's pro football and there's no rah anything. It's like, you've got to be very real with guys. How you communicate becomes absolutely key to your success. And I think the thing I like the most about Wilks is that it's pretty clear that he communicates openly with his players and they had a good dialogue there. I think that matters a lot. Now, T. Brizzle says, Hassan bleeping Reddick. MF says that Robbie Gould took a shot at Jalen Hurts. No, he didn't. I don't think so at all. I think I saw that people were taking Robbie Gould's comment and saying it was a shot. Why do we always do this? If we ask athletes a question and they give us the pat answer or the non-answer answer, we immediately criticize them for, they dodged. They didn't answer. Then you ask a guy a straight question. Hey, who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl? And he gives you a thought-provoking answer where, we think that we can, if you make us, I think he made the point that if you make Jalen Hurts play from the pocket and make him throw the ball, that you may have success. And that's his perspective. And that's his opinion. And you are seeking out his opinion. And then when he gives it to you, you're like, you're taking shots. No, he just told you honestly and openly. He gave whoever asked that question a legit answer and a real perspective. He wasn't like, he didn't just say, what, everybody's good. And I really can't say. He gave you his perspective. You know what? If you can keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket, I think you can beat the Eagles. I mean, that's an opinion. And I don't look at that as taking shots. I know Eagle fans might look at that as taking shots, but I don't think that's taking shots. I think that's a confident veteran who's got nothing to lose because he's a kicker and it's now the off season, and there's and he's telling you, how he feels. I mean, I don't look at that any different than Brandon Ayuk telling Brad Graham that, he feels like the Eagles are beatable and that the Eagles defense can be game planned and has weaknesses and can be exploited. I think that's great. When you have a smart interviewer and they ask a good question and it's thought provoking and the athlete gives an answer, we gotta stop, trying to twist it into, man, these guys are taking shots, and just saying, hey, credit Robbie Gould, credit Brandon Ayuk. They didn't just give the passing, politically correct answer. They told you what they actually felt. I think it's refreshing as hell. Bomber T says the weakness of Philly is their quarterback, in my opinion. Man, that's a hard argument to make. Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate this year. He's their weakness. But I will say this. I agree with Robbie Gould that if you can somehow take away the Eagles' incredibly explosive, powerful run game behind, the NFL's best offensive line and force them to pass and make them a little bit more one-dimensional and somehow keep Hurts hemmed in the pocket. There's a lot of ifs right there, right? If you can stop the run, if you can keep Hurts hemmed in. But if you make Jalen Hurts play strictly from the pocket, I think his accuracy could be somewhat spotty. I think his arm strength is just okay. I think his ability to throw with anticipation is not top of the shelf. I think top of the sphere. I think it's mid pack. So I agree. I don't think that he's a weakness, but if you can make him play the way you want him to play instead of the way that he prefers to play in the play action game, passing in third and short, second and short with, heavy run action formations and play action pass and, all these things that can slow down a pass rush. That's where he's got you. To me, the same key for the Chiefs is going to be the same key that I had for the Niners going against Philly. You have to get them into 3rd and 4 or longer. If they get into 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, with that line, those runners, those receivers, Hurts' mobility, his ability to carry out play action fakes, the zone read stuff, it's near impossible. You can't get off the field. You can't get off the field against Philly if they get into 3rd and short. With all the ways they can pressure your defense. But if they can fall behind the chains, if they can get mixed in a penalty, if now you're looking at 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 or longer, I think they're an offense that can be defended. And I think Kansas City has the ability to do that in this game. MF says, Robbie Gould, if you make Jalen Hurts play quarterback, you're probably going to have a good day on defense. What he means by that is if you make him play quarterback hemmed into the pocket. And, basically, if you can, what's the big if there is if you can neutralize their running game and make him play quarterback. What he's saying there is that if you get to 3rd and short and he's a quarterback / running back, it's going to be the same thing that the Niners saw against Atlanta with Marcus Mariota, except with a smarter, better quarterback with a better line, though Atlanta had a good line, with better weapons, so Atlanta had good receivers. The Eagles are better. The Eagles have better personnel than Atlanta, and if you let them get into 3rd and short, they will beat you. But if you can somehow, get them to fall behind the chains, get them into 3rd and long, make Jalen play from the pocket, which is what Robbie's referencing here, MF. I think it's good. I agree. I agree with his statement right there. And I'm not going to bang. I'm not going to say that's taking shots. To me, that's now maybe if he was asked to, I can see where somebody would see that line and say, oh, that is a shot. But I got to think that he probably expanded on that. And there was probably more to that thought, or there was more thoughts coming. And in the context of the interview, I think that's probably fine. And I prefer that athletes say something as opposed to the Eagles are pretty good. Kansas City's pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah. Who's going to win? Hard to say. Man, come on. Take a side. Have a take, Say something. Bomber T. Robbie's right. I think Robbie's right as well. Mole says Niners would have proven that had they not run out of quarterbacks. Yeah, I mean, I love Mole. And I tend to agree with Mole on that. But I understand where that plays like loser talk, right? Because it's like, yeah, if my grandmother was, we all know if, and, there's a lot of ifs. But man, I really believe the 49ers would have won in Philly if Brock hadn't gone down. That's how I feel about it. Now, everybody's got a different feeling. Eagle fans don't feel that way. And I know it comes across as incredibly weak to say the Niners would have won if Purdy's healthy. But I believe they would have. So, I mean, I really do. I watched that game. The one thing about that game that is impossible to take away anything real is that and I know that the Eagles game plan changed as soon as Purdy went down and Josh came in. They weren't trying to do as much. So, yeah, the Niners defense really, did a nice job of bottling them up. It would have been a bigger challenge, I think, if the Eagles had called different plays and had a different game plan. But the Eagles were playing that game to win. And once Purdy went down, I thought their offensive plan probably got more conservative and probably would have been a little bit more wide open if Purdy hadn't gone down. So it's one of those things. Yeah, the Niner defense looked really, really good, but you got to factor in that the Eagles were also, becoming like intentionally one-dimensional to make that clock run. I think that's a big part of it. Mole, when does Coach Wilks join us here on the Krueg Show? I can put it in a request, that's for sure. Will Wilks talk to the media soon? That's a good question. I will put in a call to Corey Rush today from the 49ers and find out. Bomber T, they need to open up a place in Sacramento. He's talking about Pig in a Pickle. Jim Mole, who went to Sac State, said that place would crush it in Sac. I've talked to Damon about opening new places, and he's looking at Petaluma and a couple other spots. But, yeah, I mean, when you have a great barbecue place, you could open it on the moon and people would go there. In fact, I was joking with Damon. I said, thank you for advertising on the Krueg Show, but let's be honest. Restaurants, do they need to do advertising? If you have great food, you have a packed restaurant. People will go, they'll try it, and they'll be like, oh, that was good. And people will always remember where they had a good meal, a good lunch, a good breakfast, a good dinner, a good late night, whatever. I mean, they'll remember. I've recommended restaurants that are great restaurants to people. And, they'll, to this day, I've had people come up to me, Krug, thanks for that recommendation on that restaurant, in the city. It's like, we go there, once a month now. It's like, I mean, it's, people know where good food is. But yeah, Pig in a Pickle is absolutely amazing and would dominate in Sacramento. MF says Keith Law's top 20 Giants prospects came out. You know what? I'm going to deal with the Giants prospects that I don't believe in any of them until they succeed in Double-A. So, like, I'm interested now to see Casey Schmidt, the third baseman, who they say is, maybe a Matt Chapman-like defender. And I'm interested to see Vaughn Brown, because I think Vaughn Brown might be a guy who can conquer Double-A and move on. But man, so many of the Giants prospects, even the ones that have great years in A-ball, they turn around in Double-A and they just don't do anything. And it's one of those things. There's a world full of guys who played great in rookie league, look good in low A, look good in high A. But man, they got to the Eastern League and it was just like lights out. or they got to the Texas League and it was like, what else are we going to do with our life? Or we got to the Southern League. Those 3 AA leagues are big time. And if you can do it in AA, you can do it in the majors. I'm a firm believer in that. But there's plenty of guys who do it in A-ball who crap out in AA and never make it to the major leagues. So my new thing with the Giants is if they have a prospect that people are talking about, awesome. That's great. I'm happy for them. I want to see all their prospects, flourish, but I don't want to hear anything about them until they conquer AA. Mario says, great job, Larry. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Mario. Julius, just disgusted by all the Niners getting interviewed this week, making excuses for losing to the Eagles. Just admit you got beat by the better team and move on. No, you don't have to admit that you got beat by the better team. That was the one game where they didn't get beat by the better team. I mean, the Niners think they were the better team. Nothing got decided in that game. I mean, seriously. I mean, you'd have to be the biggest Eagle fan to think otherwise. That game was over 6 plays into their first offensive drive. They ran out of quarterbacks. They couldn't do anything but hand the ball off in the second half. They didn't get beat. Get beat? Beat them? The Rams. The Rams beat them in last year's NFC Championship game. That was a team that beat the 49ers. The game was even. The Rams came from behind. The Rams defense shut it down at the end. They won a legitimate game. This Niners-Eagles game was not a legitimate game. That game was over. Now, the Niners, I'm not saying the Niners won, but don't tell me that you got beat. You didn't get beat. You got to be kidding me. The 49ers were leaning on a quarterback that was in the building for like 29 days or something. Before that game. It's like having a NASCAR race and the driver going down. Oh, you got beat. No, you didn't get beat. Your driver had to be taken out of the car after the second lap, and your replacement driver was not ready to roll. That's what happened. They got beat. Oh my God, that's an embarrassing one. Mario Trutanic, great job, Larry. Keep up the good work. Actually, I just read that. Bomber T, Eagles got lucky. I think the Eagles are the least proven Super Bowl entry I have ever seen. They played the 32nd best defense or 32nd best schedule in the league. Then they got the New York Giants at home after a 2-week break and the Niners on their 4th string quarterback. It's who you beat and how you beat them. And I don't think they've beaten anybody. So I'm not that impressed by the Eagles, and I'll take the Chiefs on Super Bowl Sunday. BV50, Larry, do you put Wilks in the same level as Ray Rhodes? No, I don't. Ray Rhodes was a phenomenal defensive backfield coach and a phenomenal coordinator, but Ray Rhodes had a skill that separated him from many others. And that was Ray Rhodes is one of the greatest evaluators of defensive backfield talent the game's ever known. He's right there with Belichick and Bud Carson and Seifert and some of the great defensive backfield coaches ever. Ray Rhodes is a guy who helped the 49ers for years. Never have to really invest that highly in defensive backs. Yeah, they took Ronnie in round 1, but Carlton Williamson, Eric Wright, Don Griffin, Tim McKyer, many others through the years, Chet Brooks. They drafted a lot of big-time defensive backs. Only Ronnie was round 1, and that was Ray Rhodes. And when Rhodes left, they started swinging and missing in the draft on defensive backs. Dana Hall, Mike Rumpf, and others. And, those were attributable to other guys. So, yeah, Ray Rhodes to me is on a different level. I think Rhodes is better than Wilks. I think Rhodes, had incredible communicator, great tough guy, fiery, smart, incredible personnel evaluator. You mix all those traits together and, I personally think Rhodes is on a different level. Paul Perriman says, nowadays, too many people are sore losers. We lost. Deal with it. Nobody said anything otherwise. I just said that I think the Eagles were fortunate. It's not about they didn't beat the Niners, that's for sure. They won the game, but they didn't beat the Niners. And that game was over as soon as the Niners had no quarterback. Julius, has anybody watched Peter King's interview of the Eagles GM Howie Roseman? No, I did not see it. Who won the Executive of the Year? Has that been given out yet? Did Howie Roseman win that award? I don't know. I didn't see that. Kyle Shanahan did not win Coach of the Year. And to be honest, I didn't think Kyle Shanahan deserved Coach of the Year. I thought he deserved to be among the Coach of the Year candidates. I would have given it to Doug Peterson. It went instead to Brian Daboll. But look at the talent on Daboll's offense and look at the talent on Shanahan's offense. Yeah, Daboll definitely deserved it. He turned around Daniel Jones, Isaiah Hodgins, who was a player that they picked off the street off the Bills practice squad. He became a huge factor for them. Daniel Bellinger, a rookie tight end at San Diego State, became a factor for them. They somehow put Saquon Barkley back together. They leaned on an offensive line with a lot of young players. I thought Daboll, was fantastic this year, and I think he deserved it. But I would have considered Doug Peterson. Why? Because look at how bad things were in Jacksonville before Peterson got there. They had Urban Meyer. They had all kinds of guys who wanted out. And, credit Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson for keeping that thing together and keeping that team together. I mean, that was impressive. I mean, he really did a nice job of keeping that team together. And Jacksonville with a very young cast, found a way to win the division. And I think they've got a bright future there. One, because I think at the end of the day, I think Trent Baalke, for all of his criticisms that people, throw his way, he knows personnel. He's not the worst personnel guy. And then Doug Peterson's a good football coach. So I think it's a good combination. You got one guy who can coach and only wants a coach. And you got one guy who's a GM who, really is just a scout who wants to grind through personnel. I think it's probably a good fit. Motivation Gaming says, Krug, nonstop grinding. All right, big day today on the channel. Jordan Elliott's going to be by later on. We are going to also, what else are we doing today? Oh, Grant Napier today at 4 o'clock. We're going to have Grant Napier on. We'll talk a little bit about the NBA trade deadline and what he thinks of the upstart Kings. Can they hold on? What he thinks of the Warriors parting with James Wiseman and adding GP2 back to the mix, what he thinks of the KD trade, what he thinks of the Kyrie trade. It'll be good to catch up with Grant. So that's at 4 o'clock Pacific, unless Grant reschedules somehow, but we're scheduled for 4 o'clock. And then Jordan Elliott, we're going to try to hook up with Jordan today as well and talk a little 49er football as well as the Super Bowl. So I want your predictions. Who's going to win the Super Bowl? We've got this one from Mark Graves. So the Eagles defense didn't have to worry about the pass as well when Purdy got hurt. Yeah, exactly. Come on. The Eagles beat the Niners. Come on. I mean, that's ridiculous. The Eagles beat the Niners as much as, on the scoreboard. But I mean, that game was over. That game was determined. The problem with the 49ers there was that Jimmy Garoppolo probably refused to suit up and they had no other quarterback. And I think that's probably why Kyle Shanahan was so salty at the end of the year and why he was so terse and somewhat cold in his signing off on Garoppolo, because he feels betrayed, it sounds like, by Garoppolo. And you know what? Shame on Jimmy. I mean, seriously. I mean, I want guys who show up to win. Everybody gets paid, and that makes it a business. But some guys show up for the check. Other guys show up for the win. To me, by staying hurt and not playing in that game, it just shows me that, at least in my opinion, Jimmy shows up for the check. He would rather win. Everybody would rather win than lose. But some guys show up for the check and other guys show up for the win. And I think he shows up. And there are some guys that show up just to kick ass. Let's be honest about that. I think Jimmy shows up for the check. I think he shows up for the check first. I think he shows up for the win second. He's played hurt in the past, but this time he made a business decision for himself. And I don't know. To me, I think that's somewhat his legacy. I mean, if they had Jimmy Garoppolo there, they may be playing on Sunday. And what are you afraid to compete? The Eagles are a good team, but you had a good team on your side as well. So I don't know. I don't know the exact truth. We'll probably never get the exact truth. But to me, that rubbed me wrong. And if I was Shanahan, hell yeah, I'd be rubbed wrong too. What? So everybody, and then people who defend Jimmy are like, well, everybody should do what's best for them. No, that's not true at all. Do what's best for your team. The old saying, there is no I in team. You're on the team. They're paying you millions of dollars to be on the team. Be available for all the games you can be available for. Don't prioritize your free agency. And I get it. There was risk there. What if the same thing that happened to Brock happened to Jimmy? Then Jimmy would have lost some money. But to me, you got to put these things in categories. You're on a team. When you're on a team, and I say this to my kids all the time in youth sports, but it's the same. Youth and pro sports are exactly the same. If you commit to the team, commit to the team. That doesn't mean you show up 75% of the games. Show up all the time, 100% of the games. I mean, sadly, we had a kid on one of our teams, youth teams, that scheduled a birthday party opposite the game and invited the team, and then the team a bunch of kids on the team went to the birthday party, and the team had to forfeit the game. And to me, I thought that's like the worst example. I mean, it's hardly life and death, but that's like the worst example of parenting of all time. You're committing to being on a team. What does that mean? That means you show up all the time. You don't just show up some of the time. You show up all of the time. You finish. You finish what you start. You don't quit. And you don't go to birthday parties, in scheduled birthday parties opposite your team's game and invite the entire team and forfeit the game. When, if you get involved in team sports, guess what? It ain't about you anymore. That's what being on a team means. If you don't want to play team sports, go play freaking tennis. Go box. Go be an ultimate fighter. Go do something where you're not leaning on other people. If you're going to play team sports, be about the team. The team, the team, the team. Harbaugh said it. He's right. It's about the team. It's about making sacrifices for the team. I remember there were years where I was on some teams as a young kid, and I went to my dad, you know what, I want to quit this team. And he's like, well, and he'd say, why? Well, Dad, I don't like soccer that much, because everybody plays soccer for a while until they, find football, basketball, baseball. I mean, some people love soccer, but I didn't. So I'm like in the 5th grade, 6th grade, whatever it was. And I told my dad, I don't want to play. I don't want to go to any more of the games. Why? I don't like soccer. He's like, no problem. I'm like, oh, sweet. And then they said, you can quit at the end of the season. and I'm like, no, but I don't want to go anymore. He's like, no, you're going. You're going to go because you're on the team and you made the commitment. And just ask yourself this. If everybody did the same damn thing, would you even have a team? Bomber T. Very well said, Larry. Thank you. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent there, but there you go. Glass half full guy. Nice video on the Giants trade targets. I'm hoping they try for some of those guys, but I'm not optimistic. I'm not optimistic that they will. Hope I'm wrong. Yeah, no, I hear you. But if you look at the San Francisco Giants, I did a video, and thank you for checking it out. On the one thing that really stood out to me is the number of young position players that are rumored to be traded this spring, from Max Kepler to Gleyber Torres to Carson Kelly to, I've seen so many different, and you look at the Giants outside of Joey Bart, they don't have a young position player that they can build around for the future. They don't have that piece. They got decent pitching. They got decent relief pitching. They've got some decent players, but they're all older players. They don't have a young position player rich team, to the point where really it's Joey Bart and nobody else. They have no young first baseman. They have no young second baseman. They have no young shortstop. Maybe Casey Schmidt will change things at third. They don't have a lot of young outfielders, at least that are ready to graduate to the big leagues. So the Giants could use a young position player or two just to get through this season. I don't know. I mean, I know there are people that think they're better than the Diamondbacks and Rockies. I don't. I think we might be looking at last place. Maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, but I don't see it. We got this one from Joe. It says Eagle fans are scumbags, plain and simple. They made one defensive play, which was blown dead after the pass was ruled incomplete, then recovered by the Eagles. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, they're not all scumbags, but some of the video that's circulated from 49er fans walking into the stadium and just people, if you're sitting there in a parking lot and there's thousands of people that are all ready to jump on your side, and the road team is walking into your stadium, they're fans, and you're flipping birds from far away, you're a coward. You're a coward and a jackass. And that's probably what a lot of those people are, cowards and jackasses. But yeah, come on. I mean, some of those scenes, you don't have to abuse. It's a freaking football game that you're not playing in. All right. And guess what? You can buy your Fletcher Cox jersey. You're not on the team. All right. Don't think that you are. And guess what? If you actually asked every player in the NFL, hey, what do you think of fans of your team beating the crap out of fans of opposing teams? They'd be like, you know what? If you fight in the parking lot over in the pregame of our games, you're a goddamn fool. I mean, that's what the players, if you want to know how the players think about you, they think you're a goddamn fool. That's the truth. I've heard them say it. They won't say it necessarily for the cameras, but the players, they don't respect that. The Eagle players don't respect their fans, getting physical and attacking people and flipping birds. They don't respect that at all. They're not going to say anything about it. They don't respect it. They think you're a joke. They think you guys are losers and jokes. That's the truth. Jim Mole says Brian Daboll, coach of the year. Eagles Howie Roseman is the executive of the year. I thought the executive of the year could have gone to Lynch. I mean, he did find Brock Purdy in the last pick of the draft. I'll say this: 3 years from now, when you look back at this 2022 offseason, my prediction is that people are going to say, how did John Lynch not win the Executive of the Year award? You say, well, what's that based on? Well, not only did they did a nice job improving their special teams, not only did they find one of the best rookie quarterbacks really in the history of the NFL with the last pick in the draft, but the 49ers, without a first-round pick, had an incredible bonanza of young players on their roster. When you think of all the young players that they brought in this year that are, I think, key cogs going forward, Danny Gray, Spencer Burford, Nick Zakel, just to name a couple. Obviously, Brock Purdy, Ty Davis Price, I think, is going to be a good back in a year or two. Jordan Mason, and that's just on the offensive side of the ball. Then you've got Drake Jackson. Wait until fans see Kalia Davis. Kalia Davis is the real deal. I'm telling you, he's the absolute real deal. Marcelino McCrary Ball. Look what they've done in the secondary with Samuel Womack, Diamador Lenore, Ambry Thomas in last year's draft. So, I mean, but I can see where Howie Roseman would get it. To me, the Howie Roseman move that really won it for him was when they traded with the Saints for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I mean, that was a tremendous addition. C.J. Gardner-Johnson is an incredible strong safety. He's an incredible nickelback. In a lot of ways, he's kind of their Jimmy Ward. He can kind of play any spot in the secondary. Just an awesome player to the fact where if I'm the Niners, and I had money to spend in my secondary, I would be interested in C.J. Gardner-Johnson as my nickelback. I absolutely would. I think he's one of the great nickel players in the game. Motivation Gaming says, hey, Krug, sent you a Twitter DM to buy a shirt yesterday. I promise you, folks, I will get those shirts out. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how to get them all shipped out. I will get that done in the next day or two, I promise. Digital Drew, the Niners lost. They were not beaten. Thank you. That is the truth. Digital Drew is on the money. They lost. The Eagles had more points at the end of the game. They were not beaten. There's a big difference. Big City says, I mean, physically beaten. 916_49er. Facts, Larry. All right. So I think I'm behind a little bit in the chat here. Let me see if I can catch up. Kathy says, look at what Purdy gets paid and how much Jimmy has made from the Niners in the past years. Yeah, I mean, believe me, if Purdy continues to play well, he'll get paid. He'll get paid. I mean, it's just the way it is. Mr. Big Tuane 49er Krug, you're talking best case scenario. Everyone isn't the same like 2020 when Kittle came back and Jimmy didn't. Why are we surprised? Well, I hear you. I hear you there. Paul Perriman says, follow through. Had to learn that as an adult, unfortunately. Yeah, that's what it's about. Anybody can show up on the first day. Anybody could fill in for a day, but can you follow through? Can you bring it every day? Can you be a true pro? Jim Millay, scheduling a party, inviting the team, that's bootleg. But but every invited kid's parent should have said, no effing way. What's wrong with you? Exactly. Jimmy knows. Jimmy knows. I mean, could you imagine if, just the ridiculousness of that. We're going to have a party. Okay, it's bad enough that you have a party. Go have your party. Just don't invite the team. If you invite the team, now the team's not, then they're either not going to your party and your kid's upset that nobody showed up at his party, or they're skipping their team's game. I mean, God. Molay, this is a good one. This is going to be Joey Bart's year to not fucking suck. I like that. Paul Perriman, everything is fool's gold with the Giants right now. Poor Giants. Unbelievable that how few people showed up at FanFest. My God. I mean, the Giants, if the Giants get off to a rough April, I mean, they're going to be literally nobody there in May, June, and July. I mean, there's no team in baseball that needs a big April more than the San Francisco Giants. Artemis 4994 makes a donation. Is Nick Sikel ready to step up and replace McGlinchey? He's not a right tackle. Nick Sikel might be ready to step up and replace Jake Brendel. That could happen at center. Nick Sikel could step up and be ready to share right guard with Spencer Burford. If somehow Chris Forster felt like he could get Burford's feet quicker, Burford does have experience at tackle. You could kick him out to right tackle. I think Nick Sikel is no doubt a future starting offensive lineman in the NFL. No doubt. He's smart. He's tough. He's aggressive. He's going to get nothing but stronger, better, quicker, faster. Nick Sikel's going to be a good football player. I mean, he already is a good football player, but that's a big, big jump. From Fordham to the NFL is a big jump. But now he's had a year to redshirt, and I would say the Niners will plug him in as a starter at some point. I think either right guard or center. I don't think it's going to be, though, at right tackle. That's going to be the tough spot. If they lose McGlinchey, the priority is going to have to shift to replacing McGlinchey probably in free agency. And the name that I like the most is Caleb McGarry. Isaiah Wynn's interesting as well, but I think Caleb McGarry would be my guy. Woodpit 420. Larry is hoarding shirts. Dude, believe me, I would love to get rid of every single one of these shirts. I just have to go down to the press to the I just gotta stop doing so many live streams and go dedicate a day to shirts. Yesterday we did 6 hours of live streams, and so I didn't get on the shirts. But I promise I will absolutely get those shirts out. And they're cool looking shirts. They absolutely are. Mark Says, Larry, any chance the Niners pull a Warriors type move and trade Trey Lance to the Colts for DeForest Buckner? Oh, I see what you're thinking there. Like the way the Warriors brought back GP2, bring back Buck. Well, okay. As far as the Trey Lance thing, it seems that Trey's got a kicker on his deal that would, make about a $10 million hit if they wind up trading him this year. So I just don't see that. But I will say this. I think when all NFL scouts go look deeper at this draft class and go look deeper at the free agent class, then John Lynch is going to get calls. There's no doubt. He's going to get calls on Trey Lance. But you also heard Brock Purdy say that, he has told his surgeon that they've got an understanding that the surgeon is to repair the elbow as to the best needs of Brock's career going forward. So, and that's fair and reasonable. You're not going to just go with one plan to fix a car and then open up the hood and see you have something different problem and say, no, I'm sticking with my original plan. And the same thing can be said for any kind of elbow surgery. If you go in there, you think you're going to see one thing, you see something different. And let's say they need to do a full reconstruction. If they do, they do. I don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that. Niner fans, Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that because that means that he's going to be gone for the year. And nobody wants to see Brock Purdy miss next year. But the surgeon has to do best by Brock and his future and fix that elbow. And if it needs a reconstruction, it needs a reconstruction. So I don't think the 49ers, that surgery is coming up in a couple of weeks. They're going to have to see how that surgery goes and then see how he reacts and then see how his rehab goes. I don't think they could trade Trey Lance until they know that Brock Purdy is going to be a reasonable facsimile of what they saw this year. Even so, they're still going to need two other quarterbacks, and they probably won't want to trade Trey. I'll say this. I love what I heard from Trey, where he basically came out and said, hey, look, Brock's done a lot this year, and I just am honored to have a chance to compete. That shows me that Trey is super smart, and Trey gets it. And Trey's exactly what the Niners thought they were getting as a person. He's an awesome person. And I have no doubt that Trey's going to be successful. It's just a matter of time. How long is it going to take? It takes some guys a number of years, and coming from the FCS level and then sitting out football as long as he has, now dealing with all these injuries and having to compete, there's some hard days ahead for Trey for sure, but he's going to get there. I firmly believe. I would put my personnel evaluation skills on the table and say, Trey Lance eventually is going to get there. Why? He's smart enough. He's tough enough. He's athletic enough. Football means enough to him, and he's got a great ethic. He's got a great ethic about him. He's got a great work ethic. So that's it. End of the discussion. As far as, is he going to be an all-timer? I don't know. Is he going to be just a good starting quarterback? I don't know. I'm not sure. But he's not going to be a bust. He's not going to be this. I've heard people say, Trey's going to be out of the league in 2 years. No, he's not. No, he's not. Absolutely not. I would challenge that. Trey's going to get better and better and better and better. Why? Because football is the family business. Football is important to Trey Lance, and he's smart enough and talented enough and competitive enough. He's got all the traits you want: heart, mind, athleticism. Is he there? No, he's not there right now, but he's going to get there. And it may take a while. And if you ask me to make a prediction, I would say it's going to be like 3 years from now. So think about that for a second. He's already had some bumps in the road. And I'm saying that I think it will be like 3 more years before he's firmly established as one of the NFL's better young quarterbacks. And at that point, he won't even be super young. He'll be like, in his late 20s. I think it's going to take that long, but I'm very confident he's going to get there. So I'd be deathly afraid to trade him. I guess is my long-winded way of saying that. The Colts gave him their blue helmet designation when he came out in the draft. That's kind of like what the Niners have their gold helmet designation, like for their, the creme de la creme of draft prospects, the best of the best. And they had him in that category. So I could see them absolutely coming to the 49ers and saying, let's make a trade. But you're not getting him for nothing. I mean, I would say if you say what would it take? It would take probably, I'm not sure if Buckner would be a fit because Buckner's got such a monster salary. I'd love to have Buckner back, no doubt. I think so would John Lynch. So I don't know that Buckner works. But as far as trading Trey, I need a first round pick and a player. And, some people say there's no way you're getting that. That's fine. Then there's no way I'm trading Trey because I'm not going to look like a fool on the back end. I mean, the one thing about this Warrior trade with James Wiseman, I think James Wiseman's probably kind of a marshmallow who's not going to be any good. That's my sense of it based on what I've seen, he's not a natural rebounder. He doesn't fight out there. He's got a lot of talent, but Andrew Bynum had a lot of talent. There's all kinds of guys who do nothing who have lots of talent. I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but trading James Wiseman at this age, to a young ascending team like Detroit that's going to give him the minutes that he needs, that could look really bad. That could look really, really bad in 3 years. Because the light could go on, he could suddenly start doing it, and then you've traded a 22-year-old 7-footer who's 7'1", 260, and can run and jump as well as almost any center in the league for a defensive 2-guard who's 30, and in 2 years will be 32. Jim Millay says, "What's Ryan doing? Make him ship the shirts." It's great. That is absolutely great. Just right, you got to do it. Jim Millay, dude, you have no idea the things that they should but don't do for their season ticket holders is ridiculous. Talking about the Giants. Yeah. Mark Graves, I fixed my car by turning up the radio. We got this one from Joe. Can't trade Trey Lance. They need him this year at least. All right. Well, we've got lots of people in the chat, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say. Let's see. Paul Pearman's got some good ones. I kind of like some of Paul Pearman's stuff here. Molay's got another one here. He says, maybe if he actually plays, we could get a sense of how good he is. Yeah. I mean, that's really the deal with Trey. Until he plays, nobody really knows. Paul Pearman, Trey is so mature for his age. Those were not easy interviews. No, Paul, you're totally right on. Those aren't easy interviews, but he handled it so perfectly. I think if there's one player this year that I didn't interview with the 49ers that I'm most disappointed that I didn't interview, it would be Trey. Because I really believe in Trey, and I never really had a chance to tell him that. And I never had a chance to really sit down with him and talk a little bit about what his experience has been like so far and how he's dealing with it. And I would have loved to, because I know, it didn't surprise me at all that all these morsels of awesomeness have come out in this interview that Rich Eisen did, because Trey's an awesome kid. And he's been, his mom and dad are good people, and they've raised a good son, and he's got, a phenomenal view of the world, and he's got great perspective. I can't, there's almost no young prospect that I think is more impressive than Trey Lance as a person. Paul Pearman says, yeah, Trey loves football and will put the work in. Will put work most anyone. He will outwork most anyone. Kevin F., who's also one of my favorites in the chat. Kev, I think you've had some incredible comments over the last week. He says, Lance will be better than Wiseman, ? No doubt. No doubt. Book that. Now, I don't even know how good Wiseman's going to be, but I know Trey Lance will fulfill his potential. I'm skeptical whether James Wiseman will fulfill his. And I was skeptical before the Warriors traded him. I don't see an animal. I don't see a monster. I don't see a guy who wants to challenge every shot in the lane. I don't see a guy who takes every rebound personally. I see a guy who seems most engaged when he's 18 to 20 feet from the hoop and he's bending his knees and he's looking like he wants to, sit there and shoot his perimeter shot. That's what I see. I see a guard in a center's body. BV says Larry will get merch function on your channel. It will make purchases easier. You know what? We're actually working on that as well. The first round, I'm going to get these shirts out. But yes, you're right. I'm not going to be doing this left and right all the time. We'll figure out a different way to do it. Bomber T says, would you swap Trey for Zach Wilson? Wow. Zach Wilson lost the locker room. He lost the support of the players. Now, Trey may have too if he had played. But Wilson did by kind of his lack of maturity and his lack of accountability. I think that was a lesson. I think all young quarterbacks should live vicariously through Zach Wilson and learn how to and not to handle failing publicly in a major market. Zach Wilson was given an opportunity, and it's so weak, by the way. Would you say it's your fault? How much of this is your fault? It's like that the New York media is lame. Sit there and they just lost, and obviously the offense isn't doing well, and the goddamn answer to your stupid freaking question, and yet you're still going to ask the question. Why? So you can get some soundbite from Zach Wilson saying it's his fault. And then what? After and the evil part about this is after the guy admits that it's his fault, then you're just gonna pile on even more than ever before. And he knew that. And that's why he tried to dodge. But he got bad advice. You can never dodge. You just always have to admit that you failed and move on. But the fact that he didn't necessarily embrace it, that was more about a kid who's played at BYU in a small market, who doesn't have a lot of big city experience, who doesn't know how to handle the New York media. I mean, literally before that presser, if I was their PR guy, I would have told him, hey, these are the kinds of questions you're going to get. And don't even make any kind of leaning towards defending anything. Just own everything and be done with it. Own it and move on. Don't ever try to sidestep it. Don't ever try to deflect it. Don't ever try to blame anybody else. Always take full blame, even if it's not your fault, and move on. That's the way you have to handle it. He didn't handle it that way. But there's a big difference between people like Zach Wilson's a fucking bust. No, he's not. Zach Wilson has incredible talent. Now, the thing about Wilson is when he played at BYU, he played behind a line that was all, fifth year seniors. And I mean, you could have parked a Suburban between the pass rush and Zach Wilson. So, he's never, playing in the NFL is about playing every down in a muddy pocket. When he played at BYU, he never played in a muddy pocket. And what I mean by that is, you got bodies flying around you and guys stunting, and you've got to be able, with all that chaos going on around you, you've got to stay focused on your route combinations and your receivers and trying to make the play. And you can't stare down the rush. Your eyes have to be downfield, looking at your receivers, looking at the coverage. And when you play in a muddy pocket, like you do in big time college football, like you do all the time in the NFL, you start to get comfortable with these bodies flying around you. With you're starting to be reasonably comfortable, let's just say, amid the massive amounts of chaos that these quarterbacks have to endure. Well, I don't think Zach was really used to that. He's always had a solid 6 to 8 feet of separation. There wasn't a lot of muddy pockets at BYU. So he probably wasn't ready to play the NFL game. And they threw him out there because it's throw him out there. They got nobody better. And, you got a young line, you got young receivers, and he made some mistakes. But I think Zach Wilson's going to be a really, really good player. Now, would I swap Trey for Zach Wilson? That's a tough one. Why? Because Trey is very popular in the room with the players. Zach Wilson was so unpopular that the players were wearing T-shirts of the backup quarterback in number on the flights. So how would the Niners locker room respond to a Zach Wilson trade? That's one. Two, what would be the purpose of that? You're going from young quarterback to young quarterback. They both kind of need to play. Neither are an ideal backup necessarily if Brock's your starter. And then, then there's the assessment of Trey, the football player. The Niners, I'm sure, have made some evaluations on Trey, how accurate he is, how well he sees the field, what kind of learning curve he has to play the position. And their evaluation could be anything. It could be anything from Trey just needs to get healthy and get a game or two under his belt, and we think Trey's a Pro Bowler. Or it could be Trey's a complete non-starter, is not nearly as accurate as he needs to be to play in the NFL, and will never be able to play from the pocket. I mean, literally, there could be a huge gamut of opinions. So we don't know what the Niners' opinion is of Trey. I don't think I would swap Trey for Zach Wilson. But if you told me that Kyle Shanahan's evaluation is that Trey is never going to be accurate enough to play from the pocket and always has to be a dual threat runner, and he's not a good enough runner to not be a quarterback from the pocket. He has to be if he's not a quarterback who can operate from the pocket, he won't be a quarterback worth much in the NFL because he's not fast enough. He's not Lamar. He's not Michael Vick. He's not a young Steve Young. He's got athleticism, but he's not an impact runner. So this idea that he's some dual threat, he needs to stop being a dual threat and make plays from the pocket and work on the nuances. If they decide that he cannot do that, then yeah, they should consider any swap, and that includes Zach Wilson. But I don't know that Zach and Purdy are ideal either, because what if Purdy plays and then you got Zach Wilson sitting there stewing about not playing? And I don't know that that's a positive situation. So, they're two young quarterbacks, both who aren't ready. I would only consider that if Shanahan and the offensive coach's evaluation was that Trey may never be able to be anything but a dual threat quarterback. If he can't do it from the pocket and that's their evaluation, I would make the trade. But once again, I'd be very, very nervous to trade Trey Lance. That's how confident I am that Trey Lance is going to be good on the backside of his career. I'd be even if Brock were totally healthy and went on and won the Super Bowl, I'd have a really difficult time trading Trey Lance, because Trey Lance is a phenomenal prospect. And if you told me that Trey Lance got with like an Andy Reid and became a Mahomes-like player in 3 years, I wouldn't be shocked by that. I absolutely would not be shocked by that. He's got that kind of physical skill set, and that kind of combination of physical, mental football is important to him. He's got a lot of the Mahomes traits, at least from where I'm sitting. Jim Molay says trading Lance would really screw the Niners financially. Yeah. So it's probably a total non-starter. Got this one from Unlimited Joker. Larry, do you think the 49ers are rushing the Purdy situation similar to what they did with Raheem? It's always possible. It's always possible. I mean, they maybe Shanahan is just speaking that. I mean, even their 6-month timeline, when you looked at their timeline, it didn't quite add up. They're talking about he'll be ready for training camp, and then they said, he'll be back in 6 months, and training camp's in 5 months. So it's like I don't know about that. It doesn't sound like he's gonna be. It's a 6-month rehab in an ideal world. Training camp starts in 5 months. He'll be ready for camp. No, he won't be ready for camp. From what I can tell, he'll be ready for maybe week 1. That I think is probably more realistic. Mr. Joe, Larry, anyway, the 49ers trade their third-round picks to move up in the draft. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if all those picks are tradable. If they are, I think absolutely. To me, one of my favorite edge rushers, and if some people say edge rush is the number one need, is Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. I think he's probably going to go 25 to 35 in that range, maybe 25 to 40. So, yeah, I'd move a couple third-round picks to get up and get a guy like Isaiah Foskey. I'm a big Foskey fan. Arthur wants to weigh in on James Wiseman. He says, film tape on Wiseman showed an agile big man with tremendous upside. Then in walking around Steve Kerr, and suddenly this guy can't play in the NBA anymore. Then in walks Steve Kerr, and suddenly this guy can't play in the NBA anymore. I'm very skeptical. I think the Warriors did a lousy job with the development of James Wiseman. Nothing means less than NBA regular season games. You couldn't get him out there and find out what he is. I mean, to me, it's an absolute crime that Golden State got to the day where they traded him before they got to the day where they figured out if he was any good. That ain't good. You have to figure that out before the trade, not after. And now they didn't play him enough. They don't know what he is. Now they're just crossing their fingers. And all I got to say for Golden State is I hope they win the title this year. If they win the title this year, probably nobody will really care because they'll be, well, they did win the title. They did run it back with GP2, and that will be the most important thing. But if they don't win the title this year, and they're not favored to, and James Wiseman emerges in Detroit like lots of people feel like he could, yeah. Bob Myers looks bad. The Warriors look bad. Kerr looks bad. Delos Milicevic or whatever. What would you say you do here? Paul Perriman. I almost feel like Trey came here as a young-ass kid and has gotten bullied by many people, including the media, rooting for him, and I'll be a fan wherever he goes. I'll say this, Paul. He definitely has come in as a young kid, but nobody in the media has bullied him at all. I think he's been treated incredibly well. I haven't seen anybody who's done anything in any way that's even slightly negative. If I'm wrong, tell me where I'm wrong. I'm in that room. I've never heard any of those people ever say anything negative about Trey at all. On the record, off the record. Joe says, Larry, love the show, but you need a background upgrade. You don't like the studio? Here's the thing. I've got a green screen. I can go green screen, but I don't want to go green screen. I don't like it. It kind of cuts off your head, and every time you move, you're like screwed up. But I do have a soundproof studio, and you're right. I could probably upgrade the background. Sorry, Joe. Hope you can stomach it. I do have my Niner UK flag, and I've got my Gold Miners helmet up top. I've got in the corner here my Bounce fabric softener, so I can put that out in the laundry. I've got a couple key baseballs. I've got a football from the Niners that says Krueger, air conditioning. I got enough, but I hear what you're saying. Waveware says, agreed, Paul. Trey deserves better. Tell me. Somebody tell me. Who's abused Trey Lance? You said he's gotten bullied. According to Paul Perriman, Trey Lance has gotten bullied by the media. I've never heard anybody ever even approach bullying in any way, shape, or form at all. I mean, to me, I would say I can't understand that comment at all. Paul Perriman says, bad locker room guy compared to a good locker room guy. 49ers pride themselves on good character guys, talking about Zach Wilson. Yeah, and I don't even think that Zach Wilson's a bad locker room guy. I really don't. I think he made an ill-conceived quote, and the New York media's run with it. Blank, Larry, can you explain what Purdy's recovery timetable is looking like? Well, we don't know yet. That's the truth of the matter. I can go to the latest that I've looked or that I've read about on Purdy, and Purdy has said there could be some question as to getting a hybrid surgery, which is reconstruction with the internal brace. And, I guess he went on the radio and provided details about his upcoming surgery, and the surgery is going to take place, it sounds like, on the 22nd. and Keith Meister is the surgeon. He's a Dallas surgeon. He's well known. And I guess he's like specializes in these UCL repairs. And so Brock trusts him. Brock says that Dr. Meister does 200 plus of these UCL repairs a year. So he's one of the best, and he feels confident that he's in good hands with a good surgeon. And that, I mean, that's really that's where it starts, right? I mean, what do they call the guy who graduates last in his class in med school? A doctor, right? So there are different levels of doctors. Ask Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr and I had the exact same surgery, a microdiscectomy, and my doctor, who was phenomenal, did it to perfection. And I was carrying my baby around in 2 days, and I was lifting weights in 2 weeks, and I was running in 2 months. Um, Steve Kerr had his spinal column punctured, leaked spinal fluid out in the same procedure, wound up with massive migraines, had to do all kinds of secondary and post-op procedures, and had to battle horrendous post-surgery conditions. All the same microdiscectomy, to help a disc issue in the back. So who your surgeon is matters. Brock said that everyone's saying it would be best for my career moving forward to get the surgery and get the repair with an internal brace. So there could be some question as to getting the hybrid surgery, which is reconstruction with the internal brace. So, they're hoping for a 6-month recovery, but as far as a solid timeline versus that 6-month prognosis, Purdy was asked about that, and he says it's the doctor's call. He says the doctor's done this surgery year after year with the best of the best as far as MLB pitchers are concerned. So he's worked on pro athletes and athletes whose elbow is absolutely vital to their money-making ability as professionals. So he's seen all kinds of elbows, and he's going to go in there. He's going to make the best call, and he's not going to do it just for the heck of it. He's going to try to, Brock believes that this Dr. Meister will make the best call for his career moving forward. And he says the doctor knows what's best, and he's going to make the best decision for us. I guess it's a long-winded way of saying there is no timeline yet. There's no concrete timeline, and there may never be a concrete timeline. It may be about pain. It may be about, how he recovers. It may be about the scope of work that needs to be done once they get in there. So I think that's the long-winded answer. No timeline yet. 916_49er. Larry, will Kyle learn how to use Trey correctly? It's a great question. I don't know. MF is shouting at Dave Fleming. Says Dave Fleming has great thoughts on all sports. Love his takes. I do too. Dave is the man. And I'll tell you, during the pandemic, when sports weren't going on, and Dave would just stop by with us and talk about meals that he made for his family and, drinks that he made for him and his wife and friends. And I mean, those are some of my favorite segments on radio really ever. Right. Cause Dave's just so cool. And then, what I also love about Dave is he's obviously pro Giants. He's the Giants announcer, but he's not so pro Giants that he just can't ever criticize the Giants. I love Dave. I think Dave is one of the best I think he's one of the few guys that could literally do play-by-play effectively. And if he wanted to, he could do a talk show simultaneously, concurrently, and be just as credible and not upset anybody. And, it's an impossible thing to do. I mean, to sit there and talk to the fans, and they want to fire this guy and fire that guy, and, calling you out for not being real with your takes. And then you got to walk in the clubhouse and talk to players, and their girlfriends or wives heard like maybe 10% of your show the night before and heard some phrase they thought didn't sound right, and now told their athlete, relative or friend that you're running them down. And now that guy who didn't hear your show is standing in the middle of the clubhouse questioning what you said about him. I mean, it's just It's a clusterfuck. It absolutely is. Glass half full guy says, would you advise Trey to spend time with Steve Young? Seems like a great guy to learn from. That's what I'd do if I were him. I would. I absolutely would. You know, Steve, and you know, Steve is a great guy to talk to about the game. Steve's a great guy to talk to about ascending to the leadership role. Steve's a great guy to talk about balancing your life as a public figure versus being the face of the franchise. Steve's a great guy to talk to about almost any aspect of football, but so's Greasy. And I think that's why Greasy was a good hire, because Brian played in the league and he knows the pressures. And like, I'll give you an example. I think Baker Mayfield, his ratio of commercials that he's done to games that he's won is not good. Baker's done way too many commercials. He's a major national commercial pitch man, and he's not even established in his career. He put the cart before the horse. Do you need to make a few extra bucks from ad revenue? Is that so important? You know, I would rather win that Super Bowl first, or at least establish who I am in the league first. And then let's get to, you know, making a few bucks off the field. And I just think some of these guys are so ambitious about making a few bucks that they're not even. Who's Baker Mayfield? Why am I buying anything that Baker Mayfield is endorsing? Who is he? What is he? I don't. There's as many bad stories out there about Baker Mayfield as there are good stories. And if I own my own company, I want something more than just some, you know, middle of the road, undefined career quarterback. That's how I see that. I think Trey would definitely get a lot of great advice from Steve, because Steve's been there, and Steve also could tell him, hey, you know, this is the noise that's going on around you, but it's just that, Trey. It's just noise. Thing is, Trey's so smart. He may not even need Steve, you know, as far as, I mean, Trey's dad played pro football. Now it was Canadian football, but he still played pro football. I think Trey is keenly aware of, you know, of how he's going to be looked at. I mean, look how many people talk about, you know, him going out to a strip club. You know how many young guys go to strip clubs in America? It's hardly like some, you know, disaster that he went to a strip club. But people, because they saw those images of him in a strip club, are now like, oh, you know, they reference it all the time. You know, maybe those were images that you know, you know, in an ideal world you don't have out there. But even at the end of the day, nobody died. Who cares? I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, if I was Kyle Shanahan, it wouldn't bother me. If I was John Lynch, it wouldn't bother me. You know, Trey's just doing what young guys do. But I think he should be aware of just, you know, where he is, who he's with, how he's being, you know, looked at, and, you know, really think about his role as a leader. But I don't think in any way going to a club compromises your role as a leader in the room. Paul Perriman, Larry, how was your daughter's trip to Hawaii? Was she on Oahu? She left at the perfect time because crazy winds came in yesterday. It was good. And she was in Honolulu with her some of her college friends, and one of her college roommates lives there. And so, yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have a college friend who lives in Hawaii that you could like visit? She's made a couple of trips to Hawaii, but yeah, she had a really good time. And Paul, thank you for asking, man. I appreciate that. BV50. Larry, you're very knowledgeable on player analysis. The 49ers should hire you as a consultant. Yeah. That would be awesome. MF says Trey is a gentleman. Yeah, he's solid, man. He's just solid. He's just really, really solid. And that's what happens. You know, your parents are solid. More times than not, you're going to be solid. You know, Trey's parents are solid, and him and his brother are solid people as well. And it shouldn't be a surprise. Paul Perriman should have said national media. Okay, I hear you. Kevin F. Tim Kawakami, Slater, and the athletic crew were pretty harsh on Wiseman the last 2 days. I mean, I've been pretty harsh on Wiseman the last couple of days. I've been calling him a marshmallow. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I will say this, though. there's something that's really disgusting about the pile-on factor. I've always hated that. It's like if you were critical originally and you were critical along the way, that's fine. But if all of a sudden you're like glowing and everything's glowing, and now the guy's on his way out the door and you're like, good fucking riddance. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that, man. I'll say this. I loved my role this year where I'm doing these live streams. Obviously, you guys know I'm a radio talk show guy. I have opinions. I give my opinions. And anybody who's in this chat knows that I don't really hold back. But this year, my job working for the 49ers, working for Talk Sport and Gridiron, covering the team for London, was to go into the locker room and talk to the players. And so I was giving opinions and going in there and facing up the players. And to me, I loved it. I love the challenge of it. One, it makes you better. If you sit in front of a microphone in your comfy, cozy San Francisco studio and you don't go into that room, you're not the same. You're not on the same level as me and others who go into that room. That's my opinion. That's how I feel. If you sit there and spew opinions and you don't face people up, you're not on my level. And you're not on the same level as I think everybody should have to face people up. Facing people up is good. It's made me better in front of, which I just muted by lifting it. But yeah, face people up, because when you face people up, it's amazing. You're gonna pick your words a little bit closer. Now, it doesn't always work out. There's going to be times where you're just going to have opinions. I was really critical of Josh Johnson, and I'm sure it got back to Josh through his agent. He's probably unhappy, and he probably doesn't want to talk to me, and I get it. You win some, you lose some, but ultimately, I think if you sit in a studio and give opinions and don't put your boots on the ground and walk your ass into that room, you're not operating on the same level, and you shouldn't be listened to with as much credibility. You're more on the fan level. You're not media. You're fan. You're a fan. If you sit in front of a microphone and you give opinions on players and you never face those players up and you never give those players a chance to come back to you, you're a fan. You're no different than the guy shouting from the upper deck, bloody murder, who also isn't going to go into the locker room and also isn't going to face up the guys. Face them up. Face them up. You want to talk tough? I did a show with a guy who was talking about Draymond Green earlier this year, and he's like, suck it up, Buttercup. And I my face was like, what? Come on, bro. You wouldn't say that if he were standing right here. And, we got into a little discussion about it, but I'm just saying, I'm critical, and I'm going to continue being critical. But this year, going in there every single week for 2-3 days, talking to the players, there's a level of accountability that you have when you face guys up that if you don't face them up, you don't have. Now, Tim goes in there and talks to the players. Slater goes in there, talks to the players. You're mentioning The Athletic. I'll throw out Matt Barrows, Dave Lombardi. They go in there, talk to the players. So those guys, all the guys that you're naming here, Kev, they can be harsh because they also face up the players. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you don't ever face up the players, it's kind of like, you're like the sniper from the tower, and nobody likes that. Nobody wants that. That's not good. And that's kind of weak. You've got some super strong opinion, and I used to sit there in the Giant Clubhouse sometimes, and I'd be hanging out for a couple of hours, and I'd had people say, what are you doing? What are you doing in here? I'm like, dude, I'm just giving guys who may have heard the show FaceTime to be able to motherfuck me to my face. You want to come up to me and tell me, hey, Krug, I heard your show last night. You're fucked up. And here's why. Tell me. Go ahead. Jeff Kent told me I was screwed up one time in the Dodgers clubhouse at Oracle Park. I heard your show last night, man. What you said was fucked up. I sat there and I let him vent. Then we talked it out. But that's what men do. They talk it out, and they face people up. They don't just throw a bunch of accusatory crap in front of a microphone, go back to their comfy home, read their Twitter with everybody kissing their ass, and never facing that player up. Face them up. You don't have to. It's not like you owe them FaceTime every day or anything. But heck, if you're going to have super strong opinions about a player, go in there. I'll say this. Some interviews, I did an interview you can look at right now. The last interview I did this year with Ray McLeod was after the Dallas game. And I addressed the fumble. I said, hey, you fumbled. You hadn't fumbled all year, and we discussed it. You think that was comfortable for Ray? No. You think that was comfortable for me? No. You think I liked going in there and asking him about his fumble? No. But you know what? Ray's a straight shooter, and I'm a straight shooter. And I felt like I had a good enough relationship with the guy, and I felt like I could phrase it in the way that wasn't accusatory. I'll tell you the one thing I don't like is I don't really love the post-game media thing because it comes across as like second guessing, like what happened on that play? Like you would fucking know better. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Kyle Shanahan, what was that? What was that call? Like you would know anything about that call. Like any of us know anything about what goes into his mindset there. It's just so ridiculous. So I've always hated the post game because there's no way around it. In the post game, it's like, hey man, it's your profession. I'm just dabbling in it. You're immersed in it. And now I'm going to walk into your room and I'm going to start questioning you about it. And it's like, I know like 1/1000th or 1/1000th of what you know about the topic, and I'm going to question you. It's lame. So I never, and believe me, I did the quality control job. I've spent 120 hours of work weeks looking at what do we do on first down? What do we do on second down? What do we do inside the 10? What do we do inside the 30? What do we do between the 30s? What do we do in the red zone? What do we do in short yardage? What do we do in the goal line? What do we do on play action? What was our blitz package? I've crunched it. I've sat there for hours and hours and hours and hours watching film, putting together these game plans. I know the difference between when at least I thought I knew, and now when I'm watching the game and then I'm watching the TV copy a second time. And then maybe I'm watching the all 22 2 days later. And maybe I'm watching it a third time and going through it with a fine tooth comb. That's still just like a glance compared to what I used to do preparing these game plans. So when you know when you actually have known and you knew when you actually spent the time to get it right in the past, you know the difference. You know what I'm saying? You know the impact. Kyle Shanahan is showing up at work at 5 a.m. He's trying to beat the team on Sunday from 5 a.m. to when he leaves. I bet he leaves at midnight. He's back there the next day at 5 a.m. He's there till midnight. Have you ever heard Kyle Shanahan talk about his family time? He talks about a window on Friday night. Yeah, on Fridays, we get together and we watch movies and what he's really telling you is the rest of the time he's at work. That's what he's telling you. So, I don't know. I'm all for questioning, and you guys know I question as much as anybody, but the reality is that these players and coaches are the players not as much. Their hours are more reasonable, but the coaches are putting in 100-hour weeks. And they're immersed in it, and they're dissecting it, and they're looking at scouting reports, and they're looking at self-scouting reports, and they're planning ahead, and we used to have a meeting about what our tendencies were, so then we could break our tendencies in the game going forward. What are our tendencies? Well, this is what we're doing, and then a lot of times our coaches wouldn't even necessarily know what our tendencies were. Like, oh, I didn't realize that we were doing that. Yep, that's what we're doing. Okay, well, let's mix in this play. Let's mix in that look. Let's run this reversed. Let's run this reversed. We do these plays in sequence. Let's do them out of sequence. We do this on short yardage. Let's do that. We're definitely not going to do this. So let's definitely put something like that in this week. So they think that we're going to, I mean, there's so many factors that go into a play sheet that the average fan would never even really think about. And so when people start citing camp stats and stuff like that, I'm like, no. I mean, it's worth nothing. It was 0. Anyway, I digress. MF says Larry's background is nice. I see MF likes the background, the Niner flag. Paul says the national media just tended to be very negative. Yeah, well. I mean, here's the thing. I think BV50 says gold miner is Sacramento's finest. Yeah, there you go. I think that there's a belief in the media that if you're negative, that, and I've had people say, Krug, you're so fucking negative. And I get it. But I think there's a belief among some people that if you're negative, your opinions hold more water than if you're positive. That if you're positive, you're a fanboy. If you're negative, you're somehow analytical, and the coldness, the relative coldness shows that you're, have great analytical chops. It's not always the case. Blank says, thanks, Larry. Best Niner show on the net, hands down, thumbs up. Hands down, thumbs up. There you go. Nick J. Do you see the Niners drafting a quarterback this year? If so, mid-round or late round, any hidden gems you found at quarterback? Yeah, I love this quarterback class. I really do. I'll give you a couple right here that have stood out to me. Let's see, I have a list that I put down here in my notes. I'm going to show it to you. Or I will at least take a look at it and go through it. I think this is a really interesting quarterback draft from the standpoint of the guys at the top of the draft. I think there's questions about every one of them. I mean, Bryce Young is 6 feet, 194 pounds. So he's not just short. He's also really small, 6 feet. I mean, by comparison, Brock Purdy's like 6'1", 227 pounds. This guy's 6 feet, 194. So that's a little on the smaller side for sure, for a guy who is supposedly going to be, top 5 draft choice. I'd be a little concerned about that, but he was awfully special. Some people have compared him. I saw Daniel Jeremiah compared him to Aaron Rodgers. I don't see Aaron Rodgers, but I do see a very special player in a very odd-shaped body type. But I got questions about Bryce Young. CJ Stroud, I think, is one of the hardest guys to evaluate in the entire draft because the Buckeyes receiving core is nothing but NFL awesome players going up against Big Ten corners. So, I saw tons and tons of separation with the Buckeyes receivers all year long. So I'm worried about exactly how accurate CJ Stroud is at the next level when the windows are going to be infinitely smaller. So, but he's big and athletic and intriguing for sure. Will Levis, I think I probably like the most of the high first round guys. I think he's a top 10 pick, but even that, and he's kind of like a Josh Allen in that he's big, he's got a good arm, he's a nice prospect, but there's a lot of development that needs to happen there. I watched Kentucky 5 times in the last 2 years, and I mean, so there were many times I'm watching them going, this guy is going to be a top 10 pick. So I got my questions about Will Levis. The guy who I'm super intrigued by is Anthony Richardson from Florida, who's also going to go in the first round. Anthony Richardson is one of the greatest athletes at the quarterback position we've ever seen come out of college. I mean, he's 6'3", he's about 240. So he's like basically Trey Lance's size. But he's so fast. I mean, he's way faster than Trey, and he's got a big arm, and he's such a great athlete that, I'd be deathly afraid to pass on Anthony Richardson. If I needed a quarterback, I mean, he could be an absolute otherworld type quarterback. His skill set is incredible. So I'm very intrigued by Anthony Richardson. A lot of people like Hendon Hooker. I don't. He's the Tennessee quarterback. I actually like the Tennessee receivers more than I like Hendon Hooker, who's also hurt coming into this draft. Tanner McKee. Now we're getting into, Richardson, Levis, Stroud, and Bryce Young are going in round 1. Hendon Hooker is going to go in round 2. Tanner McKee, I think, is going to go in round 3. That's the Stanford quarterback. I really like Tanner McKee. He's 6'6", he's 225. He's really, really accurate. Throw very accurate quarterback. Now, he doesn't have mobility, and he's strictly a pocket passer. And I wonder about durability. But if you're just looking for a quarterback with accuracy and stature and smarts and pocket movement ability and upside potential, Tanner McKee, Stanford was bad. Stanford was not a good team. I like Tanner McKee. And by the way, Michael Wilson, who was his number 1 receiver, both those Stanford receivers, Elijah Higgins and Michael Wilson, are in this draft. They're both kind of sleepers. Higgins is big, strong, fast. I think he's kind of more of like a movement tight end down the road. But Michael Wilson is going to be one of the steals of this draft. He is the Stanford receiver. He was one of the best receivers in Mobile. He's a good route runner. He's got terrific hands. He's got enough speed to separate. He's not a day 1 pick. He's probably not a day 2 pick, but Michael Wilson's going to be good. But I like Tanner McKee. I really like Jake Haener from Fresno State. Jake Haener is going to be probably a 4th round pick, maybe a late 3rd because of Brock Purdy's success this year. But Jake Haener is 6 feet, 208 pounds, but he's got swagger. He's got confidence. He's got experience. He's got a good arm. I really like Jake Haener. Really like Jake Haener. If I had a pick in the mid rounds, I would definitely draft Jake Haener. I mean, he's not the biggest guy. He's got Brock's size, but Jake Haener's probably even got a better arm than Brock. And he makes some incredible throws. He's a winner. He's smart. He's tough. He's a leader. He's got swagger. I like Jake Haener. I think I like Jake Haener a lot. A lot of people like Max Duggan from TCU. I think he was more of a product of the system. The guy that I really like in this draft as far as value is Clayton Tune, who's the Houston quarterback. And he had Tank Dell as speedy receiver. And they made a lot of plays to him. But Clayton Tune he's got a big arm. He's 6'2", 216 pounds. They're saying he's going to go probably day 3. I really love what I've seen out of Clayton Tune. I mean, the guy's got tremendous zip on the ball, can move, is not afraid. He's thick. He can take some hits. That's a very underrated player right there, Clayton Tune. He's one of my favorites for sure. Then there's Stetson Bennett from Georgia, and he knows how to play the position. There's no doubt about that. He's only 5'11", 190, and I think he's NFL backup material. Then there's Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA, very athletic. I know Grant Cohn really likes him a lot. Of course, Grant went to UCLA. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson, if you caught him on the right day, he looks like as good a quarterback as there was in college football. He's mobile. He's athletic. He's inconsistent. He's hugely inconsistent. He needs to be coached up. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson's an intriguing prospect. Adrian Martinez from K-State, who started at Nebraska, transferred to K-State. Very intriguing prospect as well. 6'3", 225. Had a down year this year. But, man, he's athletic, and he's done it in multiple stops in the Big 12. The guy that I think is really a sleeper is Malik Cunningham from Louisville. And they're saying he may be undrafted. I mean, they're saying maybe a 7th-round pick, maybe undrafted. And he's not big. He's 6 feet, 188 pounds. But, man, if you watch him, I know a lot of people will make the Lamar comparisons because they both played at Louisville. But Cunningham's not Lamar. But, man, he's exciting. I mean, you're talking about good arm strength, pretty good accuracy, 6 feet, 188 pounds, but in a really put together package. I mean, he's very strong, and he's got mobility. I mean, big time mobility. I mean, he can get out of the pocket and make plays. I mean, absolutely. If the Niners, I think, have 3 7th-round picks, if they don't go quarterback and Malik Cunningham is sitting there on the board in the 7th round, I'm taking him. I mean, that's the guy. So I just gave you a good picture. There's other guys, Holton Ahlers from East Carolina, DeVito from Illinois. I mean, this Lindsey Scott had 71 touchdown passes for Incarnate Word. Haven't watched a ton of him, but I got to still. Tim DeMorat, who played at Fordham, interesting player with size. He's like your prototypical NFL 6'4", 225. He's got that prototypical size. But I guess in summary, I would say, if you're looking for that super athletic guy, I'm very intrigued by Malik Cunningham. And if I had a day 3 pick, and I needed a quarterback, I'd be debating between Clayton Tune, Jake Hayner, and if Tanner McKee falls, maybe Tanner McKee. But yeah, Hayner's intriguing, really intriguing. Tune is I really liked what I saw to Clayton Tune. And I didn't watch a lot of Houston football this year, but I really liked him when I saw him in the All-Star games. So there you go. I just gave you the full breakdown of the quarterback position. We got this one from BV. Larry, is Steve Young the best left-handed quarterback of all time? That's interesting. Well, Michael Vick was left-handed, right? Wasn't Mark Brunell left-handed? I would say Steve probably is the best left-handed quarterback of all time. Can't even think of too many. They're not a lot. There's not a lot, that's for sure. But I would say Steve. Yeah, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. And I think he's probably the only left-handed quarterback in the Hall of Fame. Unless Jim Thorpe was left-handed. I don't know that. Bomber T says, don't go working for the Niners, Larry. We need you. LOL. Joe Muzzy, Larry shows are the best, in my opinion. He knows his stuff, is entertaining, and best of all, is a Niner fan. Yeah, I am definitely a Niner fan. Bomber T, Larry is top dog. See, when I saw that, I said, you know what? What's that about? But you know what? I'm going to put it up there anyway. Jorge Reyes says Ray McLeod was cool. Yeah, Ray is cool. You know what I loved about Ray? It's just like, simple guy. He's like, Krueg, man, after games, I'm just hanging with my girl and my boy, and we're just watching some movies and hanging out. I like Ray, man. The vibe that Ray put out was awesome. Absolutely awesome. Paul Pearman, a piece of advice for Rye from Steiny: the players aren't your friends. Yeah, well, that's true. I'll say this, though. The players aren't your friends, but there's many 49er players that I would consider my friends. And yet, obviously there's a separation between being media person and being I'm not buddy with them, but I consider Aaron Banks a friend. I talked to him a bunch this year, and a few other guys in that room. But I know what you're saying. I hear you. Mark Graves says, I like Larry's voices, and he has great stories. I can do a lot of voices, that's for sure. FEMA says, Larry sounding like Kyle Shanahan now. Yikes. Paul Pearman, 49ers in the Bay Area media has been known to be soft overall, though, Larry. I'm not going to get too much into generalizing. Dusty Gold, Grant talks to the players and continues his rants, which I do enjoy. Yeah. Grant's a real deal. He'll go in there. You got to spend some time in the room, or you don't have to be chummy with him. I mean, he doesn't necessarily do the kinds of interviews that I'm doing, longer interviews. But you know what? I think what I respect about Grant is that he'll go in there. He's going to give you his opinion, and he's going to let people go up to him and sound him out and say what they want. And you know what? The players are cool. They get it. All this, there was so much talk about the players and their thoughts on Grant after the whole Kinlaw thing. And we saw, Armstead kind of shine him and this and that. 99% of the players don't really care either way. I mean, they're just not, they prefer that none of us say anything bad or negative in any way about any of the people in the room. But as long as it's not intensely personal, they got bigger fish to fry. They got more important things to deal with. Jim Molay, okay, I'm not reading that. Jimmy, blankety blank could have learned a effing lesson from Kent. I ain't touching that. NorCal, Larry, I have a Brock question. Will he learn to step up in the pocket or continue to bail out of it? Does he have a mental block or a phobia stepping up into it? Well, I think we saw him step up in the pocket at times, but you're right. You don't want to escape out the back door. That could turn a negative play into a hugely negative play. So, but it's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's a nuance. It's a nuance of the position. And, the one thing about Brock is Brock's going to do what Brock needs to do to be successful. So he's going to learn all these lessons, things that worked in the Big 12. Some of those things won't work in the NFL. And I'm sure he learned a little bit of that this year. And I'm sure he'll make the adjustment because he's a really smart guy and he's really competitive. Celts Chronicle says, Big Krueg with the fire. Dusty Gold. Larry, you're a true pro. Bomber T. Larry doesn't kiss ass whatsoever. Try not to. Everybody's got to kiss a little ass. MF says, Larry worked for the Arizona Cardinals with Coach Green. No, actually, Coach Green was not there. I was there under Buddy Ryan before Coach Green. With guys like Rod Graves. Keith Kidd was the pro personnel director. He was my direct boss. My connection at the time was Joe Woolley. The great Joe Woolley worked for Kay Stevenson who built the Eagles of the 80s with Jerome Brown, Seth Joyner. Then he took a year off, was working with us in the Canadian League. And then Joe went to become the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals and under Buddy Ryan. So, yeah, there you go. The great Joe Woolley. I love Joe Woolley. We used to talk players for hours. MF says, never mind, not true. Paul Pearman, Larry, is there an amount of subs when you might consider quitting the radio gig? Now, that is a great question. I don't know. You know what? I'll say this. They're different, right? I mean, the radio gig is different. Radio, unfortunately, is shrinking. And, that's a big reason why I'm sitting here right now is that it has shrunk and shrunken me at times. But I still love it, I still love it. So, I mean, I'd like to do both. I'd like to do full-time radio and full-time YouTube and just work around the clock. But, I guess if I got to like 100,000 subs and I was making, $35,000 a month and, I guess I would maybe tell the radio guys, take a hike. Or maybe I would just buy the radio station. At that point, if I have 100,000 subs, I could probably just walk into either radio station and just say, hey, I've decided that I'm going to work here now. And my time slot's going to be X. And thanks. And then just walk out. Because when you have 100,000 subs and you can make it on the radio and get ratings, you probably could call your own shot. Wood Pit 420. You better be on that curb at 4:40 a.m., Larry. That was Urbanic. Larry, you're fucking lazy. You're lazy. I started working in pro football. Kay Stevenson's told me in the interview, he's like, I'm going to hire you. But I'll tell you this. We work harder than you work. And I laughed. I said, you don't even really know me that well. How hard do you know how you don't know how hard I work? And he's like, trust me, kid, we work harder than you do. And I said, well, coach, I'm going to give you everything I got. And I talked to my now deceased father, and he said, son, put everything you got into it. Show up early, stay late. Give him everything you got. And I said, Dad, I'll do it. I'll give him everything I got. And so in my mind, that meant get there at like 7:00 in the morning. I couldn't picture showing up for work before 7:00 in the morning. I'm like, I'll show up at 7:00 in the morning, and damn it, I'm going to be there till 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'm giving them everything I got. I'm going 7 to 7. I'm giving them 12-hour days. I did it for like 3 days. And then the defense coordinator kept saying, you're fucking lazy. You're fucking lazy, Larry. I'm like, what? I'd get there at 7 a.m. Every coach and scout was already there. I'd leave at 8 o'clock at night. They were like an hour and a half away from starting their nightly meeting. And I quickly learned. And that's when Urbanic said to me, Larry, you're fucking lazy. And I said, I'll work any hours. I don't care. I'm all in. He said, I'll pick you up and I'll drop you off. 4:45, beyond that fucking curb. 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting dropped off. And I was still living with my college buddies in Sac. So, I mean, I'm walking in after working all day to, bunch of guys sitting around playing Madden, taking bong rips, shooting pool, chasing co-eds, shotgunning beers, throwing down shots at all hours of the night and morning. It was like two totally contradictory worlds. And I remember my fraternity brothers saying, Krug, what happened to you, bro? You used to be somebody. We used to be at Club Toomey, man. We were hanging at the Fire Dance, which was a lounge, a bar. Where are you at? You don't party with us. You don't drink with us. I'm like, sorry, man. I'm all in. I told my dad I'm all in on this football gig, and all in means I gotta be up at 4 so I can shower and be on the curb at 4:45, and I'll be home, but not till like 1:30 in the morning, and then I can sleep between 1:30, 3 hours, and 4:30, and do it all again the next day. So here's the bottom line: when I talk about Shanahan, when I talk about scouts, Lynch, coaches, it's out of total respect for the hours that I'm working compared to the hours that I know they're working. Total respect. John Lynch was making millions as a TV guy. Gave it up. He's got a wife that he loves. He's got kids. He's got a family. To be a GM, I guarantee you John Lynch is working longer hours than he ever did on television. But he's all about the ring, not the wedding ring, the Lombardi. He's all about getting the Super Bowl ring. He's got, and he's not going to do it forever, I don't think. He's going to do it he's going to do it till he gets that ring, maybe 2, and then he's probably getting out of there. And he's probably smart to get out of there. So, but I got nothing but total respect. And when I say I would have done this and I would have done that, that's within the context of I'm an onlooker. I'm not rolling that film back and forth like I used to. I'm not sitting there with the clicker, back, forward, back, forward, back, forward. No, that's what they did. It used to take me like 4 hours to do what we would call a takeoff of a game, where you'd go in every play. What's the personnel grouping? What's the down and distance? What's the formation? What's the play call? And then you'd watch it. And then all of a sudden you'd be like, wait a second, that wasn't a receiver. That was a running back. He was flexed out. That's a different formation. Go back. And you just sit there rolling that thing back, seeing glimpses of movement on film, trying to catch numbers, and now the films I'm sure are way better. But then it was like sideline wide, scoreboard, sideline wide, scoreboard. And then you could watch combo films. You get the sideline wide, you get the end zone wide, end zone tight, scoreboard. So you knew what the down was. It was just, it's just a ton. And then you're talking about 4 hours going through, all the commercials are cut out, of course. There's no commercials. It's not the TV copy. But you're talking about 4 hours to take off a game, to take it from they played it to we're going to watch it as a coaching staff and we're going to turn it into our language as a football team. And then once we have it in our language, then we got to go perfect it. Then we got to go scout it and figure out how we're going to stop it. And it was just an aberration. And then all of a sudden you'll have other factors. Some player got hurt on one of these teams and they totally went against their what they normally do in this particular game. And you might not notice it until you're 10, 12, 15 plays into it. You could be 90 minutes into your deal and you realize you're taking off a game and the statistics are just going to fuck up the rest of your statistics because they did something completely different in this game and they only did it because of a personnel mismatch or an injury so I've got nothing but total respect for the guys who put together the quality control guys. Grant calls himself quality control. Grant wouldn't last a minute as the quality control guy, because quality control means that you're just grinding. And you better have good quality control guys, and your head coach better really like them. I met with the head coach every week and went through, this is what our report looks like. This is what our self-scouting report looks like. This is what we need to change. And then he would have a million things, and I'm making notes and changing everything up. I mean, it's just vast. It's vast, absolutely vast. And people who are like, oh, they should have done this. Dude, you glanced at it and you don't know that much. That's the truth. I mean, literally, like when I hear people who make these points on the radio about football, I literally want to say to them, dude, you don't know shit. You glanced at it for a second. You have no idea what you're watching, and you're making huge wholesale statements based on nothing, absolutely nothing. You realize that. So, I mean, it's just whatever. It's just the difference between what. That's why, football people don't look at media people and hold them in high regard or really consider their points with any real power. Why? Because they know they grinded that thing for hours and cross-connected it 19 different ways. And you watched it on TV, or maybe not even, and only the hardest working of the hardest working, you can watch it a second time. And you didn't know what you watched the first time. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then they don't want to insult you and be like, hey man, you don't know shit. They're not going to say that. So then they've got to make sense of your question. It's just, there's so many. That's why, if you notice, I don't ask a lot of questions at the presser in front of the other writers of like coaches. I don't do that. I don't do that. Why? Because I know the difference between knowing and not knowing. And I know that I don't know. So I'm not going to sit there and ask a bunch of questions in a public forum about a topic that I know I don't know. I know I don't know. It's what, do I have a death wish, or I want to look, I'm trying to kill my credibility by asking questions. I understand that's the only avenue the fans can get the information, but it's just when you've done the work to know, when you don't know. BV50, Larry, can you give us some Trent Baalke? You want some Trent Baalke? Yeah, I'll give you a little Trent Baalke. A lot of people were critical of Gerald Hodges, but we like Gerald Hodges. We think Hodges has a big future. Really enjoy Gerald Hodges. And yeah, we could use a little bit more depth at linebacker, but we like our guys. There you go. Here's my Trent Baalke. Mole says, got to scram. Much love, brother. Later chat. See you later for the great Grant Napier. Grant coming by at 4. Kevin F, I catch 95.7 The Game more on YouTube than on the actual radio. How about that? MF says, started listening to Gary and Larry's show when I was in college. Best part of my days. MF, where'd you go to school? Are you a Cal Poly guy? Are you a UCLA guy? Where did the great MF come from? Paul Perriman. Larry came out of the womb talking. Yeah, seriously. If my parents were alive, they could probably speak to it. MF, Larry's a grinder, and respect to John Lynch. No question. Larry, have you ever been to the Combine? I've actually never been to the Combine. I'd like to go. To me, it's a TV event. I didn't even mention this. Did you guys see that DeMaurice Smith wants to do away with the Combine altogether? Says it's like, goes against several hiring practices and so on and so forth. I would push back aggressively on that. But what is the Combine? The Combine is nothing more. Now, you want to get rid of some of the ignorant questions that some of these prospects get asked. Go right ahead. You have my total blessing on that. But as far as eliminate the Combine, hell no. Don't. The Combine's essential. It's essential for the medical. It's essential for the interviews. It's essential for the constant backdrop. How do you know if this guy's better or that guy's better outside as far as athletes if you don't put them through their paces at the combine with a constant backdrop. Everybody's running a 40-yard dash on the same surface with no wind. I mean, when you're talking about 4.29 versus 4.33, nobody could see the difference. And so what you're looking for is a constant backdrop, something that where all the players have the same, going through the same thing. So you get a decent idea. It doesn't matter if the times are fast. If you have a constant backdrop, they're all fast. What screws it up is if you run in Tallahassee, Florida with a tailwind, and I run in San Francisco, California with a headwind. I mean, that makes a huge difference as far as speed, and speed's a major part of the NFL. Major part of the NFL. They're always looking for speed, and more speed. MF went to Cal State Dominguez Hills. Would never have guessed that. I don't even know where that is. Is that Orange County? Southern California, I know, but I'm not sure what part of Southern California. Well, Dominguez Hills, but I'm not sure exactly where Dominguez Hills is. Russell Peterman. I'm waiting for Pig and a Pickle's Las Vegas location. Oh, yeah. Check out Pig and a Pickle. Ooh-wee. Paul says they should make them run the 40 in full pads. Well, yeah, but then some guys don't wear the pads. You know, Frank Gore used to pay the fine instead of wearing knee pads. Yeah, I mean, do it any way you want. Just have everybody do it the same way, right? That's really the key. But since you're not going to be able to put on pads, and all pads are different, you get more accurate assessments when their players are not in pads. But I mean, there are certain things that can be gleaned from the combine. I mean, how vital do you think 10-yard splits are for quarterback now after watching Brock Purdy's escapability and looking at his 1.55 10-yard split time from Indy? It's like, you know what? I'm going to be looking at those 10-yard splits because quickness and the ability to evade rushers and get away from the rush is a big part about playing quarterback in the NFL. There's always going to be rush. So, there's also a little, and everybody takes something different out of it. I like seeing just how the players interact. The interviews I think are a huge part of it. It's like trying to hire somebody based on their resume versus, I can actually call them and have a conversation with them. Would you rather just have a resume or have a resume and an interview? The interview, I think, gives you a lot. It tells you a lot about the person's, mindset and their approach and how respectful they are of authority, because that's what the coaches typically are a lot of times, is authority figures in these young players' lives. Do you push back and rebel against authority? Do you embrace it? Are you mature? Are you immature? Are you dysfunctional? There are some people that are just they're great athletes, they're just dysfunctional. And, that probably comes out in some of those interview settings. Like, hey, this guy's off his rocker. Whatever, you get a feeling for somebody. But for every test they do, there's a mistake that can be made from watching that test. So you got to balance it all out. Let's do this. Let's get a couple words from our sponsors, and then we'll bolt for the door on the Krueg Show. But first, one more hit of our Telmetrics, brand new Telmetrics ad. All right. Thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telmetrics for being proud sponsors of the Krueg Show. And once again, thanks to our title sponsor, Pig and a Pickle. Check them out. Coeur de Madera. They're at 341 Coeur de Madera Town Center, right there in Marin County. Open 7 days a week in Marin. And they also have an awesome location in the public marketplace in Emeryville. They're open Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. So if you want amazing barbecue, hit Pig in a Pickle. Maybe do it a takeout on the way home. Go say hi to Damon, say hi to Mary, and tell them that Krueg sent you, and tell them that you're a proud supporter of the Krueg Show, and that you're happy with them sponsoring the show. That's always good. And check out their website, piginapickle.com, and get that brisket, get those potato chips cooked in the beef fat. Absolutely amazing potato chips. And the brisket chili is second to none. Just looking at where we're at. And by the way, we do have the t-shirts for sale. If you want a t-shirt, they're $25 plus shipping. I'll have that total. I think it'll be roughly $30. But if you want one, just contact me and contact, either DM me or contact me in the chat, get me your information, and I will get your t-shirt sent out to you. And I'm going to get that done this week. I promise. I absolutely promise. In fact, I'm going to get that done today. Also, I want to check our subs. We've been growing this channel at an incredible pace. We have 13,626 subs, and we just crushed past the 13,000 plateau like this week. So we've added 626 subscribers in the last couple of days. We've added over 3,200 subscribers in the last 4 weeks. And we have over almost 700,000 views of our channel in the last 4 weeks alone. And the total watch time hours, over 181,000 watch time hours. I can't thank all of you enough. Seriously, I really can't thank all of you enough for supporting me, for supporting the channel, for supporting our content. Mark Graves asks in the chat, what is a 10-yard split? I don't remember hearing this when Joe and Steve played. 10-yard split is just the first 10 yards of a 40-yard dash. Simple enough. So I didn't look at it that often with quarterbacks. I looked at it more often with running backs, because running backs don't run 40 yards that much. It's all about how quick can you get to full speed. Some guys can get to full speed in 2 steps. Some guys can get to full speed in 3 steps. Some guys can't get to full speed until they're like 10, 12 steps down the field. So 10-yard split shows you basically quickness. How quick can you? How quick is your engine? And it's essential for running backs, edge rushers, corners, receivers. You need quickness. In fact, the 49ers in the 80s under Tony Rossano, and if you ever get a chance, go read Tony Rossano's book on scouting. His son David, I think, still does scout. Tony was the guy who basically drafted Joe Montana. The talk was that Walsh wanted Steve Dills out of Stanford, and Tony Rossano said, no, go with this kid out of Notre Dame. And the rest is history. The Niners went with Montana because of that recommendation from Tony Rossano. But I bring up Rossano because in the 80s, the 49ers would have a different way of looking at personnel under Rossano's leadership. And they emphasized what we call QABs. And it's QABS: quickness, agility, balance, and strength. And that's how the 49ers under Rossano would look for players. And they kind of the way that you saw it in Moneyball, how they cross compared, certain people, the prospects looking at it through a certain statistical prism. Quabs, guys who had quickness, agility, balance, and strength. And I'm sure the 49ers had certain drills that they looked at that were from the combine that reflected each of those traits. And so that's where they drafted a number of their players. They had to be strong in what they called quabs. And if you really think about it, quickness is a huge part of playing in the NFL. Maybe even more important than straight line speed. And agility, that 3-cone drill, that's an agility test. Your balance, there's lots of different ways you can test balance. And strength, of course, there's the bench press. You look at how many reps. I was saying the Niners ought to look at Matthew Ioannidis from Carolina as a potential free agent who might fit Steve Wilks' defense. Well, I was looking at the combine workout of Ioannidis the other day, and he had 32 reps of 225. That's great strength. And the bench oftentimes will illustrate that. Brian says, Larry, does the thigh and knee pad even do anything? Because sometimes I see that the knee pads aren't even on their knees. Well, a lot of NFL players will tell you it slows them down. Simple as that. That the knee pads slow them down. There's all kinds of guys that don't wear the knee pads. And the thigh pads used to be huge. They're now much, much smaller. So, I mean, you see it with players left and right. Look at Eric Armstead. Eric Armstead, if you look at he's wearing very, small, it seems like small shoulder pads, small thigh pads. The shoulder pads used to be these monster things. Now they're way small, and the guys prefer speed and quickness and smaller pads and less pads than ever before. So, the players, they don't typically wear a cup. They don't typically wear knee pads. If they can get away without wearing a pad, in their mind, that makes them faster. And speed is very much a name of the game. Jorge Reyes says, destroy that like button, everybody. Yep, absolutely. All right. Appreciate everybody in the chat today. Check us out at 4:00 with Grant Napier talking NBA. I'm going to get a glass of water, and then we will continue on. Jordan Elliott actually is going to join us as well today. We'll break down a little Niner football and a little preview of the Super Bowl with Jordan Elliott. I'm not sure what time that is. I got to go confirm that with Jordan, but that's coming up later today on the channel as well. And then Saturday after the Warrior game, we'll be on again with Danny and Rye doing live streams, talking about the Super Bowl, and making our predictions on the eve of Super Bowl Sunday. So hope everybody enjoyed the show. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle. Thanks to all of you. Hit like and subscribe. Help our channel reach 14,000 subs by the end of the week, and have a good rest of your Friday.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't